Amy, are you there? Do roll call?
Sorry, guys, I cannot hear you.
Our mics are on.
You saved your seat here.
Amy, can you hear us?
Try to
Or
fix that.
Well, hello, welcome.
I can't hear anything.
We got new people at the party.
Amy, can you hear us? Pull in for microphone one meeting.
I can hear you okay, but I don't know. It
Yeah,
sounds like
you
Amy
both
may be having hardware issues.
She's alternate.
Okay.
She's on Zoom.
Nope.
Oh, no, she's the.
Speaker to headphone. Go back to the speaker. Arrow up. Can you display audio? No.
There's two.
We're good. All right.
Can you
Now
hear
I
us
can hear you.
Okay. Can we do roll call, please?
It still sounds really quiet. I don't know what to do about that. All right, sorry about that, guys.
I'm gonna go get you
Okay. Laurent's gonna get a different sound bar for me. Good Wednesday morning to everybody. We'll start with the roll call. Board member Audette.
Here.
Board member Cry.
Present.
Board member Gallier.
Here.
Board member Kellstrom.
here.
Board member Plummer.
Here.
Board member Resner.
Here.
And board member Watkins.
Here.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you very much. For the Pledge of Allegiance, I have asked Dan Renwelski. He is my alternate for the city of Shasta Lake, newly elected to the council member, and he will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Cedric, you want to introduce your staff?
We'll be happy to do that, Chair. Good morning. Just before I do introductions, I want to say good morning and welcome to all here in 2025 to both returning board members as well as new board members, including Supervisor Plummer and City of Anderson Council Member Alternate Dan Gallier. I look forward to working with you all this year in 2025 as we work together to improve transportation for all of your jurisdictions and across the region for all modes of travel for everyone. In terms of staff introductions, first, I would like to introduce Amy Face to all of you. As you know, we have been having an opening for an accounting clerk. Kelly Irving, Kelly, if you can wave your hand. Kelly Irving was recently started here at SRTA on January 13th. She came to us previously from Tehama County, where she was a legal clerk and office assistant. And prior to that, had also had about 4.5 years of banking experience. So she will be assisting in the finance department now, as we will have it, working under CFO Jessica Carlson in the office. So we're happy to have Kelly here on the team. We're happy that we were able to fill that position and get that going. So with that, when you get a chance, feel free to welcome Kelly as part of the team. Additional folks, Amy Lindsay, Executive Assistant, helping manage today's meeting. CFO Jessica Carlson, Assistant Planner Laurent Beauregard is also helping assist with the meeting this morning, as well as Senior Planner Michael Cooker. They're tag teaming on that for today. And then in here also we have Senior Planners Jennifer Collum, and then also Keith Williams. And then even though not on staff, but with us is Legal Counsel John Kenny. That concludes my introductions for staff this morning.
Thank you very much, Sean. We have no workshop, so we will go right ahead to item number 5, which is the presentation by John Andoh on the RABA transportation services that are planned.
Thank you, Chair. John Andoh is the transit manager for the Reading Area Bus Authority. He had asked for an opportunity to share with the board recent changes that RABA has undertaken to improve transportation services in the region, as well as upcoming future services. The timing works well, so just a couple of our next meetings will include items related to unmet transit needs, as well as transit budgets for the next fiscal year. So with that, John, the floor is yours.
Top of the morning, board members. John Andoh, Transit Manager at the Reading Area Bus Authority. Give you a brief update on what we've been doing at RABA. And I'm also going to all the member agencies to also give them a similar presentation. Next slide. This is our mission for the Reading Area Bus Authority. This was adopted by the board in 2014, and it just basically summarizes that we're going to strive to be an efficient transit provider for those that truly need RABA services that don't have access to automobiles, and to work with social service agencies to achieve that mission. Next slide. For those that aren't aware, we are a joint powers authority. We are a separate entity apart from our members. The city of Reading, Anderson, and Shasta Lake, as well as the county, participate in RABA. We started in 76. Buses started rolling in 1981. Shasta Lake and Anderson joined the JPA in 97. The city of Reading provides the administrative support to RABA per the terms of the JPA, and we have a board of 8 members. Next slide. These are the current board members on the Reading Area Bus Authority, as well as the alternates that represent the cities of Shasta Lake, Anderson, and the county. Our current chair is Jack Munns, and our current vice chair is Mike Littau. Next slide. As I mentioned, the city of Reading provides the administrative staff for RABA. We are a division of 5 employees that are 100% dedicated to RABA, and we are now fully staffed. We also have support from other city of Reading departments, i.e. The executive officers, the assistant city manager, Steve Bade, our general counsel is the city attorney, Kristen Curtis. Our treasurer is the director of finance, Gray Bromnet. Our controller is the finance officer, Bailey Worley, and our board clerk is the city clerk, Charlene Titman. We do contract out our operations to a private party. That company is Transdev, based out of Lombard, Illinois. They will continue to run the system up through June of 2025, and then we'll be awarding, or the RABA board did recently make an award of this contract to a new firm that will start around that time frame. RABA does own all buses, assets, and facilities. Transdev operates and maintains the assets on our behalf. Next slide. And this gives you basically the organizational chart of RABA. We do have 2 positions that are dedicated to RABA, but they are housed within Transdev. That's our new mobility manager and our information technology manager. Next slide. Our current budget is $10.4 million. The lion's share of our expenses is purchase transportation, which is 61% of our budget. 75% of the services operate within the city of Reading, 17% in the unincorporated area, and then 3% both in Anderson and Shasta Lake. Next slide. Purchase transportation is $6.4 million of our budget. Our fixed cost that we pay to Transdev is about 38% of that $6.4 million. And then the variable cost, which is the hourly rate, is about 58%. Our new mobility programs, such as van pools, partnerships with Uber and Lyft, bike share, is 4% of our budget. We presently operate about 72,000 hours, and up on the left-hand corner gives you a perspective of how we split those hours. Next slide. Our revenues is $10 million. Lion's share of our budget does come from state funding. This year, we're using SB 125 funding to cover a lion's share of our operational expenses. We also are using state transit assistance from the Transportation Development Act. That's about 26%. We get urban federal funds. That's about 19%. Rural federal funds, about 5%. Our fare revenue is 5%. And then everything else shown is about miscellaneous revenues that makes up the $10 million that comprises of our budget. Next slide. We are also active in other revenues to help support our operations, to cover our costs. That includes partnerships with Amtrak and Flixbus, doing charter services, getting revenues from the TNC Access for All, selling surplus assets, investing our income, and then revenue contracts with Shasta College, and parking lot lease agreements with the city of Reading and McConnell. Next slide. We do adopt a 7-year financial plan per board policy, and the board does review this annually. And our present plan goes through 2030 to 2031. As part of this plan, we intend to replace many of our assets while intending to comply with the California Resources Board Innovative Clean Transit Regulation. We are using SB 125 for the 4 years of the 7-year financial plan in lieu of local transportation funds, as well as striving to use all transit only dollars as first priorities, such as state transit assistance, LC tops, data good repair as examples. We are using an inflator factor of 5%, 2.5% to 5% in this plan. Next slide. We have been active in transit planning. The board did recently adopt a short range transit plan, and we've started to implement elements of that short range transit plan. In addition, in partnership with SRTA, we're also implementing elements of the long range transit plan and the coordinated human service and transportation plan, which all are elements in delivering services to the residents of Shasta County. The map on the left gives you an idea of where the transit demand exists, and we're trying to reallocate services to focus in those areas where the transit demand exists, such as in the central core of the city of Redding and in Shasta Lake. Next slide. This gives you a perspective of our passenger trips carried. As you can see, we were on the upward trend, and then we started trending downward. However, we're back on the upward trend again, especially with implementing the short range transit plan and retooling the system to where service needs are needed. Presently, we ended last fiscal year at 503,018 passenger trips. Next slide. Our fare revenue has declined as our operational costs have increased. Ending in fiscal year 23-24, we are about 5.40% in fare box return. Next slide. And this kind of gives you a perspective of the fare revenue that we've collected. The board did adopt a fare increase in March of 24. So we're hoping that will help increase some of our fare revenues. However, for the foreseeable future, we envision that fare revenue is going to be a very small percentage of our revenue stream, and that this is going to be subsidized through state and federal grants as well as miscellaneous revenues. Next slide. And just as a reminder, state law did change in fiscal year 22. Basically, we are now allowed to add federal funding to our fare box recovery ratio calculation. SRTA set a standard of 15%. Because of the fact that we can add federal funds to our fare box recovery calculation, we are at about 57% fare box return, which means that we have exceeded the fare box recovery ratio requirements set by SRTA. Should be noted that the state has formed a transportation transformation task force that is going to be reevaluating the concept of fare box recovery because transit agencies across the state are not meeting their fare box recovery ratio based on pure fares alone, and will be coming up with recommendations for the legislature to review for how to basically evaluate transit performance going forward into the future. Next slide. And that brings us to the SB 125 transit program, which basically gave bailout funding to all the transit agencies across the state. Those funds filter through SRTA and through two separate pots. That is the TICRP and the ZETC programs. We're using these funds to support our operational needs in lieu of using local transportation funds. And we're also using these to cover our capital expenses, such as replacing buses and getting zero emission buses to comply with California Air Resources Board requirements. Next slide. This is basically the level of services that we're providing here in 2025. We presently have 12 fixed routes running 30 to 60 minutes throughout our service area. We have rural services to Bernie and Shingletown. We have a seasonal route to Whiskeytown. We have a contracted relationship with Amtrak to run service to Chico. We started microtransit in 5 zones, Anderson, Shasta Lake, 2 in Reading. And then on evenings and Sundays, in lieu of running big buses, we just have the entire service area act as a microtransit zone. Our demand response is for persons that have disabilities that cannot use traditional fixed route transit. We have a van pool program in partnership with CalVans and Enterprise. We have a relationship with Reading Bike Share for our first mile, last mile connection. We are in discussions with Bird about including that as part of this. As part of that, we are getting ready to launch a relationship with Uber and Lyft, where we will subsidize evening trips for those and in areas where we don't have transit service provided. And then we'll be also launching a volunteer transportation program for the extreme rural areas. We have great amenities on our buses. We now have library books that we give to passengers on the buses to read, Wi-Fi, bike racks, security cameras, heating and air conditioning. We run 7 days a week now. Buses start as early as 5 in the morning to about 10 p.m. at night on weekdays, 7 to 10 on Saturdays, and then 8 to 4 on Sundays. Next slide. This gives you a perspective of the rural services that we're providing in 2025. That includes the Bernie service, a new route to Shingletown, our Whiskeytown service, and then microtransit in Happy Valley and Cottonwood Tuesdays and Thursdays. Next slide. And we started making network changes based on the short range transit plan in August, October, and December of 24. We replaced underperforming services with our microtransit service called Runabout. We also reduced evening service in lieu of running Runabout. And we also retooled some of the routes so that they can feed into the Runabout system, eliminate duplicative services, provide more two-way service on fixed routes to speed up the travel times in the service area, and then reduce service on certain holidays due to lower demand by following a Saturday schedule. Next slide. This is our new fare policy. It's very simple to ride RABA now. No more zones, no more transfers. Basically, you can pay a fare to ride for 2 hours, 24 hours, or you can get a 7-day or a 31-day pass. Youth, veterans, and seniors now can ride RABA for free, and those fares are being covered through donations and grants that we've received. Next slide. RABA Runabout is our new microtransit service that is here. It is smaller vans that are picking up people in rural areas, connecting them to the fixed route system. We have an app that shares with Shasta Connect to make it seamless, and that's powered by VIA. And you can get that app on Google Play or the App Store. Our goal is to pick up people within 30 minutes or less. You can also call us or schedule a ride online if you don't have access to the app. Next slide. These are the present runabout zones that exist. Starting from the top going clockwise, we have the Anderson South County zone that runs on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the Anderson zone that runs Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, the Shasta Lake zone, the East Reading zone that runs Monday through Saturday, and then the Shasta Lake zone that runs Monday through Friday and also goes into Mountain Gate. Next slide. Then we have the Central West Reading zone that runs Monday through Saturday. And then we have the Reading Urban zone that runs evenings, weekdays, evenings on Saturdays, and then daytime on Sundays. Next slide. This is the productivity of the runabout system since we've started. We started with Sundays in September. The full system launched in December. You can see that the ridership continued to increase on the runabout. We're averaging about 25% shared trips. Average trip time is ended about 11 minutes. And our productivity is about 2.4. So we're well on our way towards meeting the board standard of 3 for demand response and 4 for microtransit. Next slide. RABA Runner is our partnership with Uber and Lyft. That service is hopefully going to start March 1st. As how this program works is we subsidize the first $5 on Uber. The user pays the difference above $5. They'll be able to use this service in the evening hours as well as during the daytime when there's no available transit service available. You can get the voucher from our website or a QR code on the bus. You just book your ride on the Uber app, and the credits will be taken off at the end of the trip. And then you can use the vouchers up to 6 times per week. We can count this as ridership towards the transit system. And the ultimate goal of this program is to really connect people to transportation when traditional RABA services are not available. Next slide. We've hired a mobility manager. That's Hallie Fonseca. Many of you know she was previously the general manager for TransDev. And her goal is to connect people to transportation modes throughout the county. She teaches people how to use our services as well as Shasta Connect services. She advocates for the customer, and then she's implementing recommendations from the Shasta Coordinated Plan that was adopted by this board. Next slide. As part of that, we're going to teach folks how to use the bus, and we have travel training, and we've done many travel training sessions this year alone. And the ultimate goal is to help people just learn how to use transportation services in Shasta County. And this is a hand-holding experience. Next slide. Shasta Connect is a rural services that is presently managed and funded through SRTA, uses Article 4.5 of the Local Transportation Fund. And we are in discussions per direction from the RABA Board of Directors about the possibility of consolidating this service into RABA demand response services so that we can get cost savings through sharing of vehicles, having one provider provide all the demand response services in Shasta County, and elimination of duplication of funding by funding a separate lower performing RABA demand response service and then a separate lower performing Shasta Connect service. The board, the SRTA board and the RABA board should be reviewing this in the April timeframe at their respective board meetings. Next slide. We started a relationship with the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority and Amtrak to run throughway service between Redding and Chico. This service is 100% covered by Amtrak and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, so there's no RABA subsidy for this. We do 2 round trips 7 days a week between Redding and Chico. This relationship allows for bus-only ticketing all the way to Stockton as a result, and this service connects to San Joaquin and Capital Corridor trains. Next slide. This is our current passenger trips on the Amtrak service since we started in August of 24, and each month the ridership continues to increase. The blue line shows you the revenues that are solely based on those riding Amtrak, and then the orange lines are those solely paying cash and riding between Redding and Chico. So we're starting to see local residents actually use this service to go to Chico and vice versa, or even go down to Red Bluff. So implementing this service has been a great opportunity for enhancing our mobility options for Shasta County residents. And the best part of it is that we're not subsidizing this with Shasta County dollars. Next slide. Our relationship for van pools are with Enterprise and CalVans. We subsidize vans at $500 per month. Presently, we have 2 vans in operation, and we're in the process of forming a 3rd van as we speak. Next slide. Redding Bike shares our relationship with Shasta Living Streets. It acts as the first mile and last mile connection point. So if you take a RABA route downtown or to any of the downtown stops and RABA bus doesn't get you there, or you don't necessarily want to walk, ask the driver for a code. We'll give you basically unlimited access on Redding Bike Share for a 24-hour period, and you can ride the bike to a downtown destination. For instance, for those that go to jury duty, they can come to our downtown transit center, get a bike, and then ride to the courthouse, drop off the bike, perform their civic duties, and do the same in reverse. Next slide. This is the performance data for the current van pool and the bike share system. We're continuing to work with Shasta Living Streets to help increase the awareness of the bike share program so that we can get more people using this first mile, last mile connection. And then as you can see, the van pool passenger trips have been hovering around the high 500 passenger trips each month. Next slide. These are the facilities that RABA has and owns. We have a maintenance facility built in 2002, expanded in 2009 on Market Street. That's where Transdev operates and maintains the system. And we also have some RABA staff in that facility. We have our downtown passenger terminal built in 1996, where we facilitate transfers between RABA routes as well as to our Amtrak service, Trinity Transit, Sage Stage, Flixbus, and Greyhound will be returning in March. So we'll be seeing Greyhound back at that facility as well. You can also get our microtransit services, bike share, scooters, Ubers, and Lyfts at this facility as well. We also have the Canby Road transfer facility at Mount Shasta Mall. We have 59 advertising bus shelters, 14 non-advertising bus shelters, benches, and solar lights on poles throughout the service area. Next slide. We are being aggressive in marketing RABA services throughout the service area. You may hear us on the radio. We're issuing a lot of press releases. We're active on social media. We're also managing the Shasta Connect social media in conjunction with the RABA social media. So we have one coordinated efforts in trying to market the systems together. We updated our website. We also have our ads on YouTube. And that's the link if you'd like to see our YouTube ads and radio ads that we've done. Next slide. Trying to make it easy to use transit. We have partnerships with Move It and Transit, where basically you can do almost anything you want transportation-wise on these two apps alone. You can plan your bus trip, schedule an Uber Lyft ride, unlock bicycles on Reading Bike Share, pay your RABA fares with Token Transit, book runabout rides through the VIA app connected to these two apps, and then also unlock Bird scooters. You can also track our buses in real time. And then we also have our information on Google, Apple, and Bing Maps. Next slide. We accomplished a lot last fiscal year. This kind of gives you a summary of our accomplishments to continue to make transit easy and accessible here in Shasta County. We couldn't have done a lot of this without the efforts of SRTA, the board members that sit on SRTA and RABA and our member agencies, our passengers, as well as our staffs from both RABA and Transdev. Next slide. Into the future, we're going to continue to strive to be as efficient as we possibly can. We're going to pursue transit-only funding sources to cover our operational and capital costs, continue to build agreements with organizations to fund ridership groups to use RABA services to continue to increase that fare box recovery, strive our best to reduce operating expenses, even though inflationary costs are making it highly difficult, but we're going to do our best. We're going to continue to have revenue agreements and have partnerships like with Flixbus and Amtrak. And then we're going to support other transit agencies to provide services to RABA. And that's my contact information. And I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to present. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any of me.
Okay, John, thank you. That was a very fast summary, and a lot has changed with RABA. You know, I've watched it over the years, and having the apps and reaching out to Uber and things like that is actually a great change. So do any board members have any comments or questions? Okay, thanks. Oh, Mr. Plummer.
Yeah. John, to go back to your operating expenses and revenues, it looks like, and I don't know if they're rounded, but if these are specific, then is RABA running a deficit of 400,000 a year?
No, our costs are fully covered by state and federal grants and miscellaneous revenues. It's a fully balanced budget.
Okay, so it's just rounding on the revenue to these.
It's rounding, yeah.
And then the other thing that and I'm, obviously new to this, so, but I was thinking about, like revenue per passenger trips as an interesting metric. And, so obviously I can see on slide 13 that how the passenger trips have declined. Has our revenue of that roughly 10 million stayed relatively constant over the course of, or has that gone up? So are we getting, I guess what I'm asking is are we getting a bunch more revenue, but our trips are much lower?
So slide 13, we're in the process of updating that chart, but we actually have reversed the trend. And we're actually now carrying 503,000 passenger trips annually through a combination of the various options. Our passenger per trip, or I should say our subsidy per passenger trip, is about $17.32 for the entire system, $7 for the fixed route system, and $56 for the demand response system.
Okay.
And as it relates to our costs have been going up year after year. This last fiscal year was a significant cost increase because of, since the pandemic, our costs with TransDev particularly went up 15%, and then fuel costs and then just general expenses have also gone up. So we've had to strive to try to minimize that effect, but it's been a bit challenging for us and other transit agencies across the state.
The formula is not about who rides, it's just different metrics, but not by who actually rides it. So you're gonna get that money regardless of who's using it, that's why we're trying to get people to use it or different ways to get to use it, the money's still coming.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Well, thank you very much, John.
Thank you for having me.
We're on item 6, which is to elect an SRTA chair and a vice chair. And normally we've gone through a rotation, and Shasta Lake and Anderson are the next two that are in line, but we'll open it up to any suggestion.
Mr. Kenny. Mr. Kenny, are you allowed to nominate somebody for vice chair if they are not here, if their alternate is here? Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'd make a motion to make Greg Watkins the chair and Mike Gallagher the vice chair. Since he's not here, he can't complain.
I second that.
Okay. Amy, it's been moved and seconded. Vanessa did the second. Did you hear first there?
Yes, by Kellstrom.
Yes,
Great. We'll have to take a roll call vote on that.
correct. So,
Sorry, guys.
As long as, Greg, you don't miss a meeting.
right.
Okay.
All right. So by roll call vote, Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Plummer,
Yes.
Board Member Resner,
Peter Brady?
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we are on item 7. Then we need to appoint a SRTA Fiscal and Policy Committee and an alternate.
Thank you, Chair. So for the benefit, especially for new board members, just for a highlight of the fiscal policy. Our Fiscal and Policy Committee is one of 3 standing committees that we have. It's made up of 3 members of the board. The role of fiscal and policy is to provide the highest level of management oversight with the executive director and CFO related to financial oversight of the agency, review policies and human resource needs. They're a first line in terms of going over those items and then making recommendations to the full board and administrating those things. By our sort of bylaws, the chair is considered a standing member of fiscal and policy, and then 2 additional members are needed. One item that is not within the policy, but has been for several years, a request of staff is to also nominate an alternate in case one of the standing members is unable to attend. Of the current board members who were part of fiscal policy last year, only board member Audette remains on this board. That's all the items I have for you this morning.
Okay, so we're going to need at least 2 and then the alternate. So it's good to have Tanessa on there again for the continuity. Since you were on it last year, I think you should remain on.
Yeah, I agree. I'll stand for that. Yeah. And Gallagher's not here, so let's sign him up as
I
well.
agree.
Well, I think maybe we ought to have a new member,
Yeah.
like Mr. Plummer.
Okay, I'll do it. Perfect.
It's good to help.
Okay, and then why don't we do all 3? And then we need an alternate. So who would like to be the alternate?
Chris
I was
Kellstrom.
the alternate last time. Kevin Fry.
Your turn.
You
Fred.
Make a motion to make Kevin Fry the alternate.
Agreed.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we
Well,
have,
does Aaron, do you want to be on this? Cause I'd be happy to give up my seat if you want to be on the fiscal policy. I know you want
I think
continuity,
right.
but do you want that one? Aaron,
No, you can totally keep it. I'll take, you, you and I are carrying a heavy lift. That's all I'm gonna say. So, yeah, you could take that. You could keep it if you need it.
thanks so much.
Okay, so these are really appointments and not nominations. So we have myself as chair be on it, Tanessa would be on it, Matt Plummer would be, and then Pry would be the alternate.
But no one's ever gonna miss. That's right.
So do we have agreement or do we need a vote?
We need a vote.
So what I have here is, it sounds like we need a motion for Audette and Plummer as the two other standing members and Cry as alternate.
I'll make a motion to do that.
Okay, Matt Plummer made the motion. We have a second.
Yes, second.
Vanessa Audette does the second. The roll call vote, Amy?
Roll call vote. For that, we will start with board member Audette,
Yes.
board member Cry,
Sure.
board member Gallagher,
Yes.
board member Kellstrom,
Yes.
board member Plummer,
Yes.
Voice is back.
board member Resner,
Yes.
board member Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nice to always have volunteers. So moving on to appoint a board member and an alternate to serve a 2-year term as SRTA's California Association of Council of Governments. That's CALCOG representative.
Thank you, Chair. I'll do a quick introduction as well for new members for context. The California Association of Councils of Governments is a nonprofit organization that was formed to serve regional agencies across the state of California. They provide various services, including tracking and commenting on legislation that is important to the membership, coordinating communications with government agencies. They help facilitate that quite often with us to work with, whether we work pretty well with Department of Transportation, Caltrans often, but there's other state agencies, the Air Resources Board, Public Utilities Commission, Cal Energy Commission. They help set up those meetings with those staff that have a nexus to transportation. They also help provide general education. They have a regional leadership program that is meant for developing staff at regional agencies and leadership skills. And they also have an annual regional conference. CALCOG is overseen by a board of directors that is made up of currently elected officials on the regional agencies. It's currently a 49-member board and sort of is one of those members. The representation CALCOG's board was made 2 years ago and needs to be renewed. This time around, besides a primary representative, we are asking for the board to consider an alternate for the 2-year period. Roughly, in terms of time commitment, there are roughly 5 to 8 in-person and hybrid meetings per year of the CALCOG board. With that, I will turn it over to the board for discussion and vote.
Okay, last year it was Tanessa was our rep and we did not have an alternate.
Correct. Tanessa had been the representative for the last 2 years. We did not have an alternate at the time.
And I still attend.
You-
All over the place.
And you're willing to do it again?
Yeah, it is a steep learning curve, so I would be happy to do it again, but having an alternate to sort of begin to sort of pass that on would be, I think, very beneficial because it's a lot of information.
It's a lot of us. Yeah. I mean, Gallagher has a passion for this, like probably more, maybe only second to Greg. I mean, right? And I think Gallagher speaks for the majority of this board most times. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, he's, but again, if that constitutes Tanessa and Mike in car rides together talking about SRTA and electric buses with Bernie. But in all seriousness, like
That's not really what
this
is, but yeah.
No, I know, but anybody that's gonna represent SRTA, if we're gonna start looking at passing that torch, I personally would like Gallagher to be the alternate, if Tanessa wants to keep doing it.
Well, I do want to keep doing it. And whoever, does Gallagher want?
Well, I don't know.
Because it is a
Should probably check.
very large
You
commitment
didn't say no.
with a
so.
ton of reading.
Well, he wasn't here to say no.
I have can I ask a question about how much time does Gallagher have left on his term?
This year, next year.
2 more years.
Yeah, this year, next year.
So I'm just saying, if Tanessa is saying eventually it would be nice to have somebody else, it would likely be nice to have somebody who has more time as the alternate. in case next year she wants a break. Because what that would look like, it would be if next year she's like, I actually would like to be done and I don't want to do that this year. And then we say, Gallagher, it should be you because you've had, you know, the onboarding sort of deal. Then it's only 1 year that he's on there before it goes to somebody else. Does that make sense? That's my only thought there.
Yeah. So
For all other
Aaron,
purposes.
that's a good thought. The other option here is to have like Matt Plummer be the alternate. If Gallagher really doesn't want to do it or doesn't really fit,
Well,
so.
we could just.
Can we bring it back?
Yeah, we could just put Gallagher in there and then next meeting, if Mike says, no, thanks.
We can leave it open.
We can leave it open and
Because
just.
it's just, I just think it's just smart planning to start to be passing this on or sharing it, because it's just a lot of information. So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, but you don't know what the future holds. You could be in the assembly right now. Right, but I'm saying like you did a year. I'm just saying like I think that.
I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah.
If Gallagher wants the alternate position, he should totally take that, but he should be here to take it because it's a huge undertaking.
And I totally agree with that. That's what I
So
say.
why don't we vote on the first position, and then when, at the next meeting, we can vote on the second position when everybody's here to.
I think that's great.
And if he doesn't want to do it, I'll do it.
All right, so
Well,
okay,
could
if
we-
that's a motion.
could we even have a motion that says that we have
Why don't you
Vanessa?
just move to the first and second, and if the second declines, you have an opening and just fill it at that time.
And fill it at a later
If it
date.
accepts, it's done.
Okay, so we're just going to, looking for a motion to
I
nominate.
make a motion to nominate Vanessa Audette, but Mike Gallagher as the alternate.
I'll second it.
Well, I wouldn't vote for Mike as an alternate. If Mike really wants it and wants to make the case, I'd entertain that, but I don't actually think, number one, I don't think he wants it. The amount of work that it is, I don't think he wants that either. As far as like having a voice up there, we're actually a different entity than some of the larger ones. We just represent something different, and the requirements that they have are different than what we have. So there's just a lot of parsing of understanding of what are they talking about, what that doesn't affect us at all, that are not our requirements. So I understand your point of, let's have somebody up there that's communicating our values. That's just not exactly.
Well, it's
what happens.
not even so much communicating that, but when he comes back to us, I think there's an opportunity for him to say, yeah, this is the garbage they're gonna push. And this is my interpretation of.
John just said to Nessa
Yeah.
that if Mike comes back next meeting, and doesn't want it, then we'll get a different
I know, I
alternate.
think my point is that I wouldn't vote for him, knowing what I know. I wouldn't vote for him to be the alternate based on what you think that value is going to be. I wouldn't vote for him for that. I think it's probably a better plan to put somebody on there who's gonna be here for the next 4 years and who wants to actually study the process.
Yeah.
To effectively.
Yeah.
You know, make sure that not just that we're reporting back, but that is contributing to what legislation can be in an effective manner, just because we're different. And anytime you go there, it gets dominated by the large guys. And if you don't have some nuanced perspectives, you just sit there. You just sit there and it's issues that don't affect us sometimes.
So what about, since Mike is not here and Matt has indicated that he would be interested in the thing. So why don't, could we entertain a motion for Vanessa to be the primary and Matt?
Well, why don't we just vote we haven't had a alternate. We didn't have one,
No, we
right?
have not. we
So
haven't
let's
had
just
that.
vote Tanessa in, and we still won't have an alternate, and we'll talk about the alternate next one. I mean, and it may be a moot point. Mike may not even care. Mike may
Right.
say, I don't want to do it. I just want to give Mike that option because at the last meeting last year, remember, he was pretty disappointed thinking he might not be back on this board because he cared about it so much. Because remember, he had to leave. And I'm just saying, I want to give Mike that opportunity if he wants to be involved. And if he doesn't, no problem. Matt will be
Yeah,
volunteer,
no,
I
I think it's
guess.
super fair. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it.
Absolutely.
Because at this point, if I get a choice to vote, I would probably vote for Plummer to be on, not Mike. But if Mike wants to make a pitch for it, then I would be happy to listen.
And that's all I want to do. I just want to
Okay,
give Mike.
let's have a motion for just the primary.
So I'd make a motion that we just appoint Tanessa and have no alternate.
And bring it back for.
Bring it back.
I second it.
Okay, moved by Cryan, seconded by Chris. A roll call vote, Amy?
Roll call votes. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gallagher,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Plummer,
Yes.
Board Member Resner,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So we are now on the consent agenda. They'll all be considered as one item. Unless somebody has a reason to pull it. Does anybody want to pull an item?
I just had a
Yeah.
question
On which item?
on 10-9. I don't need to pull it. I just had a question. If that's okay. Before we,
Well, I was going to pull 10.
oh, okay.
I mean, no, I was going to pull 8. I'm sorry.
Oh.
So you had a,
I
if you have a
just-
question on 9, we'll deal with the question.
Do I understand this correctly? We did not actually do our investment that we were planning to do?
We're in progress. We just haven't invested any funds yet. We're still setting up the accounts account.
Okay, so,
So half of what we did is we did half of 10 million in camp
right,
and
we
then we
waited
deferred
on,
the other
but
10.
we didn't actually invest.
So
It has not taken place.
We have not received notification from camp that the accounts have been fully set up. We submitted all the applications, all the information they need. We are waiting for confirmation that these accounts are set up so that we can then link our bank accounts to transfer funds. We have not received that notification yet.
And so what is the expected setup time for these things? It's a couple of months, that's what they're telling us, the lead on this?
No, we applied, I'd have to give you the exact date, but I'd say we applied, and then probably a week for them to respond. I guess our representative was on vacation or out sick or something, so I had to follow up and get with the supervisor, and then there was some stuff about exchanging the application, and we ended up having to fill out an application for every single account that we wanted, so it was a little bit of it's just an upfront administrative thing, but we are literally just waiting to transfer funds as soon as those get set up.
Thanks.
I wanted to pull 10-2 quick on the calendar. And then I had a question on 10-5.
You want to pull the calendar or you want
Well,
to have a question?
No,
Conflicts.
yeah, we have a conflict on the calendar. I'm not sure. So the next meeting is during the California State Association of Counties Legislative Conference. That I assume
Chris,
I don't think Chris is going, but Kevin and I will go. I don't know if that's problematic in terms of quorum, but we probably wouldn't be able to attend that next meeting then if it's at its current date,
April?
the April meeting.
So at this moment, in terms of the schedule, you still have 2 additional alternates, so Alan Long and also Corky Harmon serve as the alternates for the county, so you still have them available.
Yeah.
We can look at that and see there's a number of things that factor into our meetings because we have to coordinate with when California Transportation Commission meetings are and everything else, and our bylaws specify we typically try.
Chris, are you going to that?
No,
Because Corky.
South of Red Bluff, right?
South of Red Bluff,
Yeah, no.
I know.
I think the other
Southern
two
California.
supervisors are going
Yeah.
as well.
So you're saying 4 supervisors?
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
So that'll take care of itself with alternates.
That's
No.
what I've heard. I don't know if that's confirmed.
I don't know.
Okay,
So you
so
have alternates.
Yeah.
Well, they're
I
saying
don't know, you could show up at the meeting.
4 of you going to the CSAC?
The legislative conference. It's the once a year. So I know
Don't
Chris
you have reps on your thing?
for that.
Yeah. Don't you have CSAC reps, 2 CSAC reps?
He's the rep, I'm the alternate. The
Yeah.
other two, I guess, are,
Yeah, I mean, in historically in the past, supervisors have had the option to go.
Oh, all of them have the option to go.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
And you're saying that everybody, all 4 of you are going?
I don't know. Matt just said he thinks Corky and
I
Alan are
heard
going.
that those two are
They
going.
were
but I
just
don't
down
know.
there for the new Supervisors Institute. So maybe you guys discussed it. I mean, I don't know if you guys talked about it there. I know Chris, again, he doesn't go to Southern California.
The board could reschedule, or it could keep the meeting on basis. And who knows until you have the meeting or before the meeting, if you're gonna have a quorum or not. So you've got
so
alternates.
when is the CSAC? What are the dates for the
It's the
CSAC?
23rd through the 25th.
Well, we can follow up on there. We can adjust meetings as needed. So we'll follow up. I'll work with the chair and then we'll reach out if it looks like we need to reschedule. If you know, especially if your other county supervisors are going to go, that does present a quorum potential challenge, potentially. So we'll need to look at that.
Okay.
So we'll fix the calendar or work around it. And then what was your other one?
On the budget, I was curious if, is there, I know in the county, for example, we make budget amendments mid-year to, if we think that the end of fiscal year numbers are going to be different from what was expected at the beginning of the fiscal year. I was curious if we do something similar here, or if we're just saying.
We are pretty constrained by this is our comprehensive budget where I put all the budgets together. We have TDA budget, the overall work program, et cetera, that come together. And so as those things change, we might do updates on these budget actual reports that you get almost every board meeting, but once a quarter. And so you'll see sometimes those budget numbers will vary a little bit, but we don't do official amendments to this comprehensive budget because this is really an internal document where our goal was to give you a full financial picture, putting all of our different budgets together, and then give you these regular updates on how we're doing throughout the year. So this is really a progress report that you get once a quarter. So you will see those budget items update. For instance, the OWP items, like if you go to the last, second to last page, 4 or 5, all of these work elements. So all these work elements are part of our overall work program. So as we do amendments, these budget numbers are going to change. So in this note here at the top on the right-hand side, the top of the notes, it will always update you with which amendment I'm referring to with those budget items. So these budget numbers will change, but we don't have official comprehensive budget amendments that you will have to approve. This is just a report that you accept on a quarterly basis.
Thank you.
As part of the budget process, we also go through fiscal year, go through an audit. We want for you to actually see the revenues. For example, some of these we have various assumptions of what state revenue is going to come in for streets and roads, for the regional surface transportation program, for example, for how much LTF the region may receive. We see what those payments are throughout the year, and then we reconcile that at the end. So as part of our audit report as well, that will have the final numbers, what we've actually received throughout the year.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I've asked 10-8 to be pulled, so I'd like a motion for.
Amy, hold on, Chair. Amy, did you have a question? Your hand is up.
I do. Actually, Michael just let me know that we skipped number 9, the public comment period. So we will need to circle back to that.
Who's the chair?
All right, thanks, Amy.
Thank you.
We will back up right there. Public comment period. So we're open for public comments. Anybody that has a comment on an item on the consent agenda, or if it's a regular item, we'll refer to that, or a general comment or question under the purview of this board. So we'll open the public comment period. Thank you, Amy.
I have no hands raised online.
And I have no one online.
Anybody in the room? Seeing none, we will close the public comment period.
Thank you.
So now I'm looking for a motion on consent for one.
Were you pulling 8?
9 with 8 pulled.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Kellstrom and seconded by Plummer. Roll call vote.
Great. With a first by Kellstrom and a second by Plummer.
Plummer.
By Plummer, yes. Roll call vote. Board Member Audette.
Yes.
Board Member Cry.
Yes.
Board Member Gallier.
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom.
Yes.
Board Member Plummer.
Yes.
Board Member Resner.
Yes.
Board Member Watkins.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, on item 10-8, the reason I pulled that is it deals with funding on a diesel hybrid bus, and we had a huge issue in the past where we wanted to have a salmon runner going from here to Sacramento, and it was never permitted to have a diesel hybrid bus. And so I notice here on this funding that we have 2 different types of funding. This TIRCP and ZETCP. And one of them, I understand, permits a diesel hybrid and one of them would not. So I would appreciate it, Laura, if you would explain what's happening here and what has changed.
The Z is the zero emissions, not a hybrid.
Right.
That's electric, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for the opportunity to explain. I also realize there is a printing error in my staff report, so you can't necessarily see the changes in red on the staff report, but they are up on the screen behind me. And so the Transit Intercity Capital Intercity Rail Program, TIRCP, is a program through SB 125, and it is also a competitive program. And the competitive program doesn't necessarily allow for any sort of vehicles that create emissions. So diesel hybrids, biodiesel, although they are an improvement on the greenhouse gases that they emit, they are not allowed typically under the competitive program because in the competitiveness, entities are trying to procure zero emission vehicles, and that puts them ranked higher in those categories. For the SB 125 program, in there are two funding pots: the Zero Emission Transit Capital Program, which in the name only allows for zero emission transit capital. And so we are only allowed to purchase items that would aid in the zero emission transit capital items. So that could be chargers or hydrogen fueling stations or studies to see if we need to put chargers in different places or to buy capital like zero emission vehicles. The Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program does allow for diesel hybrid funding, or we have purchased using the Transit Intercity Capital Program. We have purchased renewable diesel buses with those funds already. And so we do believe that CalSTA will approve the diesel hybrid buses. It shouldn't be an issue, but we do still have to go through CalSTA review, which is the California State Transportation Agency.
So in a way, this is your interpretation of it and you have to get a final approval.
That is correct. That is our understanding of the guidelines.
Okay, any questions on this? Okay, I appreciate the explanation there.
Yeah, thank you.
So we'd like a motion and a second.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Okay, Kellstrom and Adet, second. A roll call vote, Amy?
Great. Board Member Audette,
Yes.
Board Member Cry,
Yes.
Board Member Gillier,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Plummer,
Yes.
Board Member Resner,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Okay, we are on the regular calendar agenda, item 11, which is Executive Director's Report. Sean?
Thank you, Chair. So I do have a few items to follow up since our last meeting. On the staffing side, for those that were returning, as you know, we have a vacancy for our planner/modeler position. We have held interviews and an offer was provided to a candidate. We're waiting for a response and hope and anticipation that that will be accepted and that we'll be moving forward of getting that person on board on staff in the next few weeks. There's a reminder for CalCog, they have their regional leadership forum next week. Both myself and a couple of my staff, as well as board member Audette, intend to attend CalCog's regional leadership forum next week, March 5th through 7th. This year's theme is Regions Rising to the Occasion. CalCog's focus here is to highlight how regions are developing solutions to complex regional challenges that serve the needs of their communities while working towards supporting state and federal performance goals. We also have opportunities to hear from state legislative folks. We've seen a number of speakers in the state legislative, senators and state assembly individuals, as well as a chance to network with regional partners and state agency staff. One focus of moving the conference usually has rotated around the state. CalCog want to have it in Sacramento because the state budgets to allow the opportunity for state agency staff to participate and to have those conversations with them during the time. And so we can actually use that conference as a way to share what are regions doing, what are the great things we're working on to meet our community needs, how can we try to partner together instead of be at odds all the time on a number of issues. So we'll have a number of fruitful discussions there. It was a reminder, if there are any board members still interested, please let me know after today's meeting. We just have one remaining board member spot reserved if there is interest on that. On the federal side, with the Trump administration taking place on January 20th, there have been a number of things we've been tracking. We do now have a state, the Secretary of Transportation, Senator Duffy, now is leading the US DOT at the federal level. They're working on their sub appointments for all the different divisions and deputies for there. So we're watching that actively. There has been a little bit of chaos that has taken place. We've been in regular communication, both with chair and vice chair of this board, as well as your Public Works Department staff. We had a couple concerns a couple of weeks ago. Federal Highway Administration had stopped sending checks to states and local agencies for invoices that submitted. That only lasted an afternoon, and then everything resumed as normal. So that was good. But people started getting worried. We did stay in communication also with Congressman Malfa and his staff, indicating what projects that was impacting, and how to make sure that we could provide the information if there was concerns related to projects. Also, we've run into an item related to our federal transportation improvement program. The last amendment's not been approved yet. We have learned that Federal Highway Administration has paused approving those, and they're moving it up to Federal Highway Administration headquarters in DC for additional review. That has not typically been the case for decades. Why that change is being made, we're waiting to find out. We understand that Caltrans headquarters staff, as well as potentially CTC, California Transportation Commission staff, are having discussions with Federal Highway Administration's California division to see where that is at, what we anticipate that will be. We know that's a concern also for local agencies for projects that you have federal funding on, that you're trying to maintain your roads, build bridges. There's a number of other things that flow through US DOT. So we are staying in communication there. Also, in terms of the federal budget, March 14th is where the current federal reauthorization ends at this moment. The House and Senate are in discussions about putting together a budget bill to try to continue the rest of the federal fiscal year. The House and Senate are at odds in their approach of how to do that. So it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out overall, but we will keep an eye on that one. The other item is with a lot of the state or the federal secretaries in Trump's cabinet being through their review process and being confirmed. We anticipate on the transportation side that once we get through this federal reauthorization, we anticipate that there will be some initial conversations starting about the next transportation bill, the next national transportation bill. The current bill goes through federal fiscal year in 2026. So we have a little about a year and a half before that expires. What we are hearing is that there's a general thought that other than this last bill that combined transportation with other federal and national infrastructure, that there may be a focus on having a transportation bill that is just transportation, and that Congress may want to leave all the other national infrastructure needs as a separate item, is what we're hearing. We will wait to see how the discussions play out. We know that, for example, aviation is a big concern right now. So how they will tie those, whether we will have a separate surface bill related to roads, bridges, and those things, and transit, and then everything else is separate, we will wait to see. We're actively monitoring that. On the state legislation side, for our end at this moment, we're in the early stages of bills being introduced. At this moment, we've not seen any bills that would impact regional transportation agencies at this time. We continue to monitor that. We have heard rumors that one or two bills that were submitted last 2-year legislative cycle might be introduced as significant changes related to the regional transportation plan process and how we might have to forecast housing. We had significant problems with that. We had the MPOs across the state said no. Even the largest area in LA, SCAG, they did an entire report and analyzed what that would have meant just for their region and how it was an inaccurate and inappropriate process to add those levels to a regional plan in terms of that. So we will watch and see if any of those bills come out. They have not been introduced. We haven't heard anything what those may be. But we also know that CALCOG staff is usually the first to get wind of a bill if it comes through. So if there's anything potential coming down the road, we may hear some updates at next week's CALCOG board meeting we'll report back if we see anything. We'll be in communication with chair and vice chair on any items as well, and fiscal and policy. Two last items I have is, for those returning, we've been a part of these conversations. As part of our regional transportation plan, we have Senate Bill 375, which essentially requires set a targets for greenhouse gas reduction related to passenger vehicles in each of the metropolitan planning organizations. There's 18 of them in the state of California. SRTA is the second smallest one in the state. As you know, we've been having meetings with a select group of MPOs across the state with Caltrans, CTC, the Department of Housing and Community Development, as well as the Air Resources Board on how we can revamp, reform SB 375 to be more in line with things that have happened today. A lot of changes in technology, vehicles, the fact that the incentives and the CEQA streamlining that was thought to help move things along faster and be more efficient have not been realized, even in our big areas. So we're having conversations there about what that could look like. We also are having discussions with CARB related to their schedule to update the greenhouse gas targets based upon state legislation. The end of 2026 is when the Air Resources Board would have to set targets. Those can be the same targets. And in general, we're having those conversations with the Air Resources Board about keeping those targets the same, given a lot of changes in the state, especially on population. As we talked about before, we lost in the population, we lost a congressional seat because of that. And the Department of Finance has said in general, state population is going to be flat or may drop as well. And so with that, there's a number of concerns that we have with the whole greenhouse reduction target process and what that means. And so we're having conversations that it's ongoing. And we'll report back if those go in our favor, or if we may need to be a bit more upfront and proactive in writing response letters and making a strong case. So we're open to have those conversations with staff and address it administratively as part of the process. One other thing that we saw was this last week, Nevada County and the Rural Counties Task Force have been working on for the last 2 years a rural induced demand study, talking about induced demand in rural regions. Induced demand essentially looks at, says, hey, if you put roadways in, it's going to induce a certain level of development, which is going to mean more traffic on that facility. We've had issues with a number of the tools that we've been required to use as part of our process. Your public works departments have also had to use those tools. That study was meant to look at what's really appropriate in more rural areas. So they've got that out. And so we'll be taking a review and see how that might help in the conversations with Caltrans, Air Resources Board, and some of the research institutions that maintain those tools, of how those can be improved or maybe get rid of them. So we'll see how those conversations go as well. That concludes my report for the board today.
Thank you. Any additional questions for him? We will then move ahead to item 12, and this is any board member has attended a meeting or a conference where they were paid by SRTA funds. So they need to report. Anybody attend anything? That's an easy one then. Item 13.
Next week.
Exactly.
Item 13, review and provide direction on the draft work element and planning budget for fiscal year 2025 and 26. The overall work program, the OWP. Mr. Kruger.
Let me get the slides up here. Working fine when it works still. Okay, I'm gonna have to wing it. All right.
We have your handout.
Should we borrow it?
Yes. Okay. Oh, here we go. Okay. Hope you don't mind my notes. Thank you, Chair Watkins, and members of the board. Before I talk about the OWP process itself, I think it's important to talk about how it fits into our overall process at SRTA. So this is kind of a mini workshop, if you will. So over here, this is a graphic I adapted from some FHWA guidance. This is a planning process. This is how we plan regardless of what we're doing, whether it's government transportation planning, or whether we're planning a business effort or a project. This is generally how it works. We figure out where do we want to be? That's our strategic direction. We figure out how are we going to get there? That's the analysis. That feeds into resource allocation. What's it going to take to get us there? And then there's kind of a process where these two go back and forth, implementation and evaluation. What are we doing? How did we do? Sometimes we take it back and adjust our resources. Sometimes we take it all the way back to the strategic level. So that's basically how we plan, whether we realize it or not. So this is the transportation planning process here at SRTA. We have strategic documents. That would be the Regional Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. The Regional Transportation Plan came along first. It's a 20-year plan that's updated every 4 years. And it sets forth a vision for our region. And it details broadly how that's going to be achieved, right? The SCS Community Strategy is updated with the RTP, and it explains how the region will achieve the state-required greenhouse gas reductions. That then feeds into our transportation improvement programs. We have a federal transportation improvement program, also called an FTIP, and we have a regional transportation improvement program, also called an RTIP. The FTIP is a 4-year program of planned projects that use federal funds or are regionally significant. And the RTIP is a 5-year program of planned projects, and then it feeds into the state transportation improvement program, which then goes over to the feds for review. And then we have the overall work program, which I'm going to talk about a little later in this presentation. And this is a yearly grant application that doubles as a list of the planning activities that the agency is going to do in any given year. And basically it talks about how it gives concrete details of how we're going to fulfill the vision that's defined in RTP. So who is involved? It's, the term that I learned in college was it's a broad patchwork of jurisdictions, right? So the RTIP is required by federal law, and that's adopted by you folks, the SRTA board. The SCS is required by state law, and that is also adopted by you as part of the RTIP process. They kind of live together. And then that particular element is reviewed and approved by CARB after it's submitted. The TIPs are reviewed depending on what they are. The federal is reviewed by the CTC, which is the California Transportation Commission, the FHWA, which is the Federal Highway Administration, and the FTA, which is the Federal Transit Administration. And then we have the RTIPs, which are approved again by the CTC, the California Transportation Commission. The overall work program, our yearly document, is required to get federal consolidated planning grant funds. These are called CPG funds. And it's also required to get state SB1 funds. This is, again, adopted by you. And then it's reviewed and approved by Caltrans, the FHWA, and FTA. So what is the overall work program? Its primary purpose is it's an application for those CPG funds I just talked about, but it also serves secondary purposes. It's an agency work plan. It talks what we're going to be doing over a fiscal year. It also serves as a tracking tool for you, the board of directors, and a monitoring tool for interested local, state, and federal partners, as well as the general public. What's in it has 2 sections. The first section is called a prospectus or an introduction that describes the region, its challenges, talks about our organization, and basically how we do our work. The second section are the work elements, and these describe what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, why we're going to do it through a narrative portion. And then it has a list of tasks, deliverables, and a schedule, and a table explaining where the funds are coming from and what they're paying for. Some of these work elements are what are called core activities and ongoing work, and others are for specific efforts within a limited time frame. For example, there's currently a work element for my 273 plan, which is I'll be talking about later today and also finishes this fiscal year. That's why you won't see it in the draft OWP that's before you now. So the core activities, what are they? One, establish a setting for regional decision making. That's what we're doing now. We're having a meeting where all of the agencies come together and talk about regional decisions and make them. We evaluate alternatives. We figure out what's going to work for our region, what's not going to work for our region. We figure out what are the unique transportation issues facing our region and what are the realistic alternatives. We have to develop an RTP. And this is a fiscally constrained long-range document that goes for 20 years and it has to be updated every 4 years. We also have to develop the TIPS, which are fiscally constrained programs based on the RTP and designed to serve our needs and goals. And then finally, we have to involve the public. We are having a public meeting. We accept public comment. That's basically our core activities. All right, so let's talk OWP. This is the OWP process. So at our December meeting, I took to you a list of preliminary regional planning priorities. Asked you to review them and provide feedback. You guys seem to be pretty happy with them. So what I did is I then developed the work elements based on that and presented those to you as part of this board packet for your review. And that includes the draft work elements and the draft budget. And this is your opportunity to review that and provide direction now. Then I have to submit that to the state for their review. They will provide feedback as well. And then I take all of that feedback and I draft the final OWP and I take that to you in April. And hopefully you adopt it. Otherwise, we don't get our money. So that is a yearly process. Get used to it. You'll see me a lot. So the OWP, we have to talk about goals. And so there's federal goals. Those are called federal planning emphasis areas and planning factors, state planning priorities, and regional planning priorities. And the reason I chose this particular document is because they're all generally going in the same area, in the same direction. Some of them may be a little more ambitious than others, like the state. But in general, we're supposed to be kind of all going in the same direction. So let's talk about the planning priorities that were approved at the last board meeting. We have improved regionally significant corridors, and this would be evaluating needs, identifying fundings, prioritizing improvements, and that would be regionally significant corridors, I-5, the I-5 Cascade Gateway Project, 273, that sort of thing. We have enhanced goods and freight movement, making sure that goods can travel to make our region economically successful and identifying the funding and enhancements to make that happen. Strengthen data and performance-based planning. This is something that a lot of people have been interested in. We have some efforts going on that are in OWP that talk about this, the Shasta data planning or Shasta planning data dashboard and some other efforts where it's real performance-based planning, which is a federal priority. So looking at the numbers and figuring out how do we get the most bang for our buck. Continuing to support active transportation in the Shasta region. It's been a very successful effort so far. We've brought a lot of money to the region that would otherwise be available to us, and it's achieved a lot of ancillary benefits. Continue to improve the delivery of public transportation. As you saw in John's presentation, he's doing a pretty bang-up job, and we will continue to support him. We have planned for a zero-emission vehicle infrastructure transition as reasonable for the North State and continuing to collaborate with the North State Super Region to make sure the rural perspective is shared with Sacramento. And then finally, we have improved public engagement with the planning process, which is something we're always trying to do to make sure that we're getting a good sample of the community. So all of those goals fed into the draft work program, which is before you. There's one new element, that's the Go Shasta Active Transportation Plan update. that is conditional on a successful grant application that's been submitted. If we're unsuccessful, it'll get backed out and the overall budget will then go down. We also get yearly formula funds. And this year, instead of creating a new work element, we're adding them to the regional freight plan that Keith is working on, and it's going to augment that effort. We're also going to be starting the 2026 RTIP. So overall, our budget is a little under $47 million. And this represents a decrease of approximately $1.4 million, mainly because two discretionary efforts are wrapping up, 273 and the Intercity bus plan, as well as anticipated revenues and expenditures. So my recommendation is that you review the overall work program and provide direction to the staff. Are there any questions?
Any questions of, overall work plan?
Thanks for the explanation. I didn't even see that you had this.
Right.
I was
It's hot off the press.
furiously
Yeah.
taking notes, but this is best explanation of what in the world we are doing.
Thanks. It took me a while to understand it, but I could explain it.
Well, I really appreciate it. I actually think for the new people, they're just gonna take for granted how excellent you guys give information. But this is fantastic information. So
Great.
thank you for that and for breaking it down into bite-sized morsels we can actually consume. Yeah. You might want to take that home and study it. You're really helpful. All right, I don't have any other.
So as a board, we provide direction to them, though. Do we have
Yes.
any direction?
Well, I have a lot.
I needed the county.
As far as what our actual, so you want us to comment on this massive,
Yearly document.
okay. So my question to you when I started reading this was like, is there anything that like, it would be great if you were like, hey, this is what you should pay attention to because this is what's different or what we've noted, what we saw before, or,
Yeah, there's other than, I tried to cover that a little bit on that last slide, but other than the discretionary grant application, there's no new work elements. This time around, we're focusing on our core activities, especially until we get that replacement planner for Medi, and trying to wrap up the discretionary projects that have already been funded. So that would be like the data dashboard and all that. So nothing new.
I didn't notice anything, but then I thought, how would I know if it was new?
Yeah.
So,
As far as the narrative goes, we updated that to reflect current priorities a little bit, nothing major. And we also updated the narrative to reflect the latest population projections.
Anybody else?
I'm needed over at the county, so I gotta go. Okay, so
You're dismissed.
I don't know if I'm asking for permission or if I'm raising my hand.
We still have a
If
four.
I have to run extra laps tomorrow.
I had
Okay.
a question on, I guess, 701.03. That objective, it's on page 38 in my packet, at least.
You're talking about work on
Page-
70103?
701.03 performance.
0.
So my question there, it says, utilize data to set and track performance measures aligned with federal goals and state goals to guide performance-based planning.
Yeah.
Does that kind of suggest that we haven't done that historically?
No, that's one of our ongoing activities. So the individual measures are shown there in the tasks. There's the safety performance measures, bridge, pavement, and transportation asset management measures, and system performance measures. And so basically, and also CMAQ, which we don't qualify for, that's congestion management, air quality. Is that right, Sean?
Correct.
And luckily, we don't have that problem yet. So we have to either adopt the state targets, which is historically what we've done, or go through the effort of developing regional specific targets. And that authority has been delegated to the director. Of course, if the board so pleases, they can always change that. But those are just basically three reports that I think are submitted by the state. We submit to the state and then the state submits to the feds. Is that?
So the performance measures, those three different categories are annual reports that we provide. We participate with the state in terms of that. The board's position historically has been the opinion that going through an entire process to review data, develop our own set of targets, because, for example, on safety, you have 10 fatalities related on the transportation system in 1 year, and your goal is to try to reduce by 3, we can get variations of one death, 2 deaths, or 8 deaths, right? And so one change has significant, difference in the metric in terms of that. So what we have adopted essentially is we adopt the state targets while we show through our tips and through our various individual projects, how those projects may potentially help those metrics for on safety. So when the local agency projects are reviewed and they go through grants, they have to show how that project would perform and what types of fatalities, serious injuries, and other metrics those projects may help reduce. And we also capture that within our transportation improvement program. On the pavement condition indexes, for example, the local jurisdictions every so often go through a entire review of their roadway system and do a pavement condition index report. We then share that information, we track that and report that at that level. So there are different things we track at different times or different schedules in terms of that.
So this is more just a recurring activity that we do every year where we update the targets.
Correct. That is one thing. One thing in reference to like the planning data dashboard that we're working on is the federal requirements of what to report on have continued to increase over time in terms they were more basic of just kind of like a paper report. We're trying to get to something where eventually it's available online. So that way the public has it, our jurisdictions have it, elected officials, you have it. You can use it to support legislation. You can use it to make a case of how the region's doing better or where we're doing worse or where we need funding. So we have kind of an online portal, especially on the grant side, that would help local agencies and be able to submit for applications. Easily be able to pull that, create maps off of that. So that is something we're working on behalf of the entire region to move towards, where it's not just a paper report, it's an ongoing data dashboard online that anyone can utilize.
Okay.
Any other questions for Matt?
I guess a similar question on 701.09, the air quality one.
Well,
It says harmful air emissions and initiate strategies to comply with the standards. I guess trying to, for me, I'm trying to establish like a baseline. Are we, because sometimes it kind of suggests that we aren't complying with standards currently. Is that where we are currently, or is it just saying that on an ongoing basis, we're keeping track of that and ensuring that we stay within a certain compliance range?
Historically, we've been in compliance. They have what are called criteria air pollutants. So that includes ozone, carbon monoxide, PM, which is particle matter.
Yeah,
Particulate matter. 2.5, which is a measurement, and PM10. And the only thing that we've gotten close on so far is ozone. And we suspect that was due to some of the wildfires. That was only at one of the metering stations. But should we, CARB basically has a process where they determine whether or not we're in attainment based on, sensors and that. And should we not be in attainment, then that kicks in a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, so with that, I should add one clarifying item is that when we talk about attainment, we're talking about the federal air quality standards. That is what impacts us as a regional transportation agency and would then impact the local jurisdictions. So for example, if we would have an area where over a period of 3 years, we exceeded the ozone federal standard for emissions, and it was not identified to one-off events like a massive wildfire, some other situation that happened, there would be a finding. Usually it would start at US EPA and they would say, hey, this county within California potentially has exceeded it. They would then task the Air Resources Board to review the data and then go through a 2-year review process, which we and also, for example, Shasta County Air Quality Management District would participate in. If it was found and determined that yes, they believe we're exceeding the standard that is set, and then there's no exceptional events, that would then mean that we would go through a multi-year process to develop what they call a state improvement program. That then impacts us in the following ways. We then have to do what they call air quality conformity analysis of a regional transportation plan, which means all projects that are within the fiscally constrained list must go through an air quality review. Those projects may be on or off the constrained list based upon how it's anticipated they would potentially perform with air quality conformity analysis tools. There's then steps the regional agency would have to take to approve and put funding towards projects that would reduce those emissions, those pollutants, to a level that is, as we get monitored over, I think it's a 5 or 7 year period. If we then are below the standard, we then go back and we can be determined now an attainment again. That has further constraints on what local jurisdictions can then put projects towards. In terms of funding, besides your regular maintenance and other activities, you would have to also illustrate how your local projects are helping to reduce emissions or that specific air pollutant from the transportation system.
Who pays for all that?
Huh?
Who pays for all of that?
So one of the things that we get is if you are found to be in air quality non-attainment, your region becomes air available for the CMAQ funds, the congestion mitigation air quality funds. We looked at that before when we were concerned, for example, also on the PM 2.5 standard. Initially, 2 years ago, it was first referred that Shasta County, as well as other counties, might have exceeded the standard. Well, there was a review period where EPA said CARB needs to review a certain number of years. They reviewed those years. They identified exceptional events. They determined Shasta County is not in that list. Other counties are and have been added in Southern California. We are not. So had we gone through that, we would have been eligible for those funds. Those funds could have helped pay towards the additional requirements we would have had to work on. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah.
We are exceeding certain state emission standards on certain items, but that does not have an impact to us in terms of the analysis that we go through and the conformity analysis. That's a federal requirement, not state.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to approve this?
It was just
Yeah, this is just feedback at this
Okay,
point.
great.
We'll come back in April for approval of the overall.
So, Sean, a lot of this is beyond our control. We set the standards, we either in attainment or we are not. If we are not, it makes a greater burden on all future projects.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, when you're talking about air quality.
And do we know, are any of the federal standards up for change, or any might be relaxing? If the-
Now that you've finished it,
I think anything's possible.
Yeah. Well, that might be nice, huh? Okay, well, thank
Thank
you
you.
for that presentation.
I'm going to go.
So we are on item 14, which is to receive another presentation and provide initial comments on the draft North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan. Yeah.
Thank you. It's gonna take me a moment. I need to make certain my consultants are here and promoted. Laurent or Michael, can you confirm that?
They are being promoted as we speak.
Okay, and then I'm gonna want my screen to show.
You will have to share your screen from the laptop you are at.
Great.
All AECom and the lobby have been promoted.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Good morning, Chair Watkins, board members, partners here in the audience, and anyone online, and if we have any members of the public. My name's Jennifer Pollum. I'm a senior transportation planner here at SRTA. I am presenting today on agenda item 14, the draft North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan. For almost a decade, SRTA has been working with our partners to improve intercity transportation for our community. Most recently, SRTA was awarded a grant and contracted with AECom and a subconsultant of AIM to coordinate and plan for better intercity bus options in the short and midterm and improved passenger rail transportation in the long term between the Shasta region and the larger metropolitan areas such as Greater Sacramento, the Bay Area, north into Oregon, and east into Nevada. The SRTA website has a long history of what we've worked on. It's that top image that you see there. And our current efforts are available on the web link that is at the very bottom of the screen, ending in North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan. Today, we are presenting on the draft North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan and seeking comments from the board. We will have a 30-day public comment period, so we are looking for initial comments now. It's not the first time that it's been presented, and we will be taking comments from you over the next 30 days, as well as those in the public and our partners. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our consultants, and they will be able to present on the plan, and then it'll come back to me.
Okay. All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Daniel.
All right, great. Thank you. I'm Daniel Kraus. Thank you, Jen. And I'm just going to give an overview of the what's in the North State Intercity Bus to Rail Plan. We kind of covered some of it at a previous board meeting. So I'll give an overview and then we'll go into some of the recommendations for strategies to implement it. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of what's actually in the plan and kind of how we structured it. So we have in our introduction chapter, we're going to go over the kind of the overarching goals and objectives for the plan, as well as the need and also the background context. Then we also in the plan documents closely the community and stakeholder engagement process that was conducted for this and is also still underway, actually. So we'll document that. We also conducted a robust data collection effort, and we document that in our background data chapter for the plan here. And then based on that data, we went through a process to identify each hub and route that's being evaluated in this plan. And then also we could then review the service concepts that were developed for each of those hubs and routes. Then we conducted an analysis on kind of potential demand for each of those routes and hubs. And then we also did a feasibility analysis related to, the difficulty of, or, ease of implementing service. And then finally, we looked at some governance options. So as you implement services, you need to figure out how best way to approach governance. So we looked at some examples and documented those. And then we end the plan with a set of recommendations for potential strategies for implementing the various corridors we're talking about. Next slide, please. Just a quick review of our community and stakeholder engagement process to date. I think we covered some of this, but we'll just do a quick refresh and then do an update. We did have an advisory committee that consisted of agency technical staff from agencies around the North State and also state agencies. Also, we met twice last year to get input from that advisory committee, which fed into the plan, that input did. In terms of overall community outreach, we conducted a community workshop last month. And as part of that, we did instruct members of the public they could comment on this draft document in a comment period, which is actually ongoing right now. And then another key aspect of reaching out to the general public was a community questionnaire that was initially run in August to September. And as when we were reporting back at the December board your December board meeting, we had a little over 100 responses at that time, and the board requested that we seek further responses. So we did that. We went ahead and extended the duration of the questionnaire, which will now run through March 24th. And so now we have, as of February 20th, we have 258 responses. So we've gotten a lot more since the December meeting, and we're hoping to get some more still over the next month or so. And so that's what we did to address that. And also we did some variations of the questionnaires to accommodate the perspective of other counties in the North State. We've got that request from various stakeholders around the region. So that's also out there, and those responses can come in through March 24th. Next slide, please. So just a real refresh. We showed this slide earlier, but we have some new members on the board. So I wanted to just kind of give a sense of what did we actually evaluate. So as I mentioned earlier, we identified some key hubs and routes to study. And so we have 5 of those, starting with Reading to a Eugene hub. Now we actually have 2 routes as part of this one. The first route was for a bus service along I-5 between Reading and Eugene. And then the second would be a longer term time frame, a rail service, which would run along the Amtrak Coast Starlight route between Reading and Eugene. We're also looked at Reading to Chico for a rail service that would extend a planned service called North Valley Rail from Chico up to Reading. So we looked at that. And then building off the Salmon Runner proposals that have been studied by SRTA before, we looked at Reading to Sacramento bus service along the I-5. And then also a service between Reading and Reno was examined via Susanville for a bus service. And then another bus service between Reading and Eureka Arcata along roughly going along SR 299. And then just a reminder, we also identified a 6th corridor, Ukiah, Clear Lake, Williams via the SR 2020 corridor. And that was identified as something of interest by stakeholders, but it was not in the scope of this study, but we've identified it for possible future study to look at that corridor. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, we did go through a set of analysis that looked at potential demand for each of these routes and hubs. And then we also looked at, feasibility of, in terms of, how feasible are these projects. So we looked at, in terms of demand, we looked at connectivity at hub stations. We looked at potential travel markets that could be served by these services. And we looked at the user experience. And then for feasibility, we looked at the cost versus benefit. We looked at geographic features in terms of engineering challenges and different things like and operational challenges. And then we looked at ease of implementation of, implementing a new service like one of these. Based on all that input and analysis, we did rank each corridor by these different metrics here, and then we added them together to get a kind of a overall ranking for the different routes and hubs. And as you can see highlighted in the orange, we have Reading to Sacramento hub bus service scored quite, was far and away the highest scoring and ranked service. So just want to put out there now, it's kind of right behind, second place would be the Reading to Chico hub, which was a rail service. While that's a little more long-term, it did rank very well. And then we had 2 bus services that were almost equal to that as well, which included the Reading, Ashford, Medford, Eugene service, which had a ranking of, it was tied for 4th with also another bus service, Reading to Eureka Arcata. So those all ranked very well. And then not ranking as great was Reading to Reno, which we were concerned about demand there. And also the rail service that would run between Reading and Eugene actually ranked the lowest. And that was mainly due to, very difficult implementation in terms of feasibility, as well as the limited travel markets. So, and there's a very high cost for that kind of service. So that's how we kind of are approaching the prioritization, is based on these rankings. Next slide. So based on the prioritization, we did develop a set of recommendations for your consideration. These are all in draft form right now. So obviously we want to seek input on these. This is kind of the crux of our report. So in terms of general overall recommendations, we looked at, one is to really work with Caltrans Division of Rail and to support them in their participation in the FRA's Corridor ID program, especially in terms of the San Joaquin Valley Corridor, which runs between Reading and Merced. So that directly feeds into some of the proposed services. Also wanted to encourage Caltrain to increase their role in supporting planning of intercity bus services, as there's a lot proposed in this plan. And it's all, given the intercity nature and the cross jurisdictional, it's really great if you can have kind of a centralizing entity that helps, bridge all those different jurisdictions. Also, in terms of all these services kind of like converging in Reading, one idea that came up was to really look at ways to strengthen Reading as a central hub and tie together all the great assets that we have currently, like the RABA passenger terminal, and there's other facilities that bring things together. But how do you tie it all together and also expand capacity if you're going to have more services converging in Reading? And then also in terms of short-term improvements for rail service that does serve Reading is the Amtrak long-distance service, Coast Starlight. There's issues currently of poor timing as well as seats not being available. So there's definitely a desire to see if we can help work with Amtrak National and see if they can help improve that situation so we can access services that already exist. Next slide.
Daniel, I do want to point out to board members, if you want to comment on the full draft recommendations, they're on pages 156 through 159 of the draft report printed out for you.
Thanks, Jen. Okay, in addition to the kind of these overall general recommendations, we developed some specific recommendations for each hub and route that we're looking at. So starting with Reading to Chico, again, we want to make sure we're working with the, Caltrans and looking at that San Joaquin Valley Corridor ID program that they're working with the FRA, and also partner with RABA, San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, which would operate rail service in the corridor, and to also be partners in that effort with Caltrans. Now, in terms of the service, the bus service is already underway that John presented on or mentioned earlier in his presentation. There's a desire to explore ways to see if that bus service can continue between Reading and Chico, even if we implement the Salmon Runner. So that's something we want to look at in the future. Next slide. And here's Reading to Sacramento. Again, this was the highest ranking route on service that we were able to analyze. And this builds on the Salmon Runner, as I mentioned earlier. So recommendations related to this is supporting RABA with near-term funding and implementation for the Salmon Runner service, and possibly utilizing RABA's Route 99X buses initially for that service as well. Also to facilitate interagency agreements between RABA, Glen Ride, SJJPA, to fund the implementation of the Salmon Runner service. Next, please. In terms of the bus service between Reading and Eureka, the main thought here was in terms of making near-term improvements is to really support elements of the North State Express proposal, which is not exactly part of this proposal, but it was something also being worked on by Humboldt Transit Authority and other partners. And the idea is to support that effort in the near term so we can see definite, travel time improvements as well as, ease of transfers in this corridor with the different bus operators that exist today. And as part of that, considering an MOU to implement that element of the proposal. So next slide. In terms of the Reading to Eugene, in terms of the bus service, it's a quite long route between Reading and Eugene. So a potential recommendation is to, engage in discussions with regional partners, such as including Caltrans and Oregon DOT, as well as bus operators, to see if we could do a shorter near and midterm phased implementation of this line, potentially initially to the, near the state line, and then potentially onward to Ashland, Medford area before finally reaching Eugene. In general, since this is an interstate service being proposed, we'd need to work closely with Caltrans and Oregon DOT to look at that. That would be for bus as well as rail. But again, that was the lowest ranking service, but if there's any planning related to that, we'd have to work with both those entities as well as Amtrak. Next slide, please. Did someone have a question?
No, I think a bottle fell over.
Okay. And then Reading to Reno hub, that would be a bus service. This is being viewed more as a long-term effort. But with that, you would need to coordinate with Caltrans and the Nevada DOT, given that this does stretch into Nevada's jurisdiction. Next, please. And with that, I will now pass it back to Jen.
Thanks, Daniel. Really want to thank our consultants that worked on this. They put a lot of effort to create a short-term project because we were coming up on a grant deadline for this project with staff turnover here at CERTA. And I really want to express my appreciation to AECOM and AIM Consulting who were able to push this project forward. Before I go into what's here before you, I would like to say that if we're not doing this here, then either we get forgotten or the state's doing it for us. So this is our effort to have a say in what intercity transportation services happen across the North State. The public comment period for the whopping plan before you is going to end on March 24th. That's the same day that we have the questionnaire closing. We are leaving that questionnaire open longer just to continue to see if we can get more input. Those public comments for generally everyone, they can be sent to me at my email address there for board members. We would ask that you CC our executive director, Sean Tejan, in providing me with any comments. The feedback will be taken into consideration for the final plan that will be presented at the April board meeting. That is April 24th, so that might be changing based on the item discussed previously. So please take note of that. It'll be an April board meeting. And again, I'm sending this back now to the board. The staff recommendation was to receive this presentation. You've got the draft plan before you and to provide any comments to staff regarding what was presented.
Jen, I have a question, and I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, and you did a ton of work as your consultant. Obviously, you did a fantastic job presenting that. But I sit here and I mean, I shake my head and I'm dumbfounded. So did anybody do any input on an electric bus getting from here to Reno and what that would look like? I mean, it would probably take 4 or 5 stations along the way and switch everybody off the bus to get them on another bus to get them over there and then back.
Right now, and we're not recommending moving forward with those. As you know, with the salmon runner service that CERTA has been working on and had troubles acquiring even the feasibility of zero emission vehicles for a connection between Reading and
Yeah, I mean, you're talking 130 miles. So even to Sacramento, you're going to need.
And we were about 100 and right. Okay, I see what you're saying. I think for Reno. So what we're moving forward in the small steps that are before us. One great thing that happened was we were able to RABA, but with CERTA's participation and relationships that we have with transit agencies across the North State, we were able to get Juba Sutter diesel vehicles that they were not using. And that's what is now being run on the Amtrak Route 3 between Reading and Chico and allows bus only ticketing.
When are those going to be
phased out?
Yes. Like 2030, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we have it has to do with the percent of zero emission vehicles that need to be purchased. So in I think 25% of their vehicles need to be. That is not, I will say, nothing that crosses state line is required. So if it's interstate travel, that does not require CARB.
Really?
So yeah, so diesel vehicles can go into Oregon, diesel vehicles can go into Reno.
Well, CARB is trying to change that now, though.
No, because the Amtrak Thruway service that runs throughout the state, Amtrak, when I say Thruway, those are buses. Those are diesel vehicles. So San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, Capital Corridor, which is BART, basically, they run diesel vehicles.
They're attempting to do that with big rigs, with trucks. I mean, CARB is saying in order to come in here. So mass transit, they're going, it's okay. As usual, we won't follow our own rules, but everybody else has to follow our rules. Gotcha.
Well, I would say on that end, in terms of there are different exceptions being allowed for some of those very longer haul types of services. Could CARB change their mind? Could they look at that differently? Yes, that could always be the case at this time. That is not an area that they emphasize at this point in terms of any type of future conversion.
And that agency is just putting a stranglehold on the whole state and entire industries. And it's like, and we're spending all this time doing this study, which again, I don't mean to. You did a tremendous amount of work and you guys did great work. But as I watch this and I'm looking at the route to Reno, and it's like you would have to change buses. If it was electric, you'd probably have to change buses 4 or 5 times on the way there and back. I mean,
I definitely hear what you're saying.
In the future, none of this is requiring an elected us to do
Yeah,
it.
in the future, but that's
In the
what I'm
future,
saying. So I mean, we're spending a
We're still
ton of money and time, effort and work to do something that's gonna be obsolete in 5 years.
Well, I guess, let me make sure I add some context to that from the perspective of, when you talk electric vehicle side, there's a variety of exceptions that are there. So for example, if you have a route and you've got certain vehicle operational demands, and it says, hey, no electric vehicle can meet the operational needs, you submit that the car, you have to show your information, but essentially you say, look, we're not going to comply with that. We're not going to purchase the vehicles for that route because there's no existing equipment there. On the other side though, remember, part of what the focus of this entire plan is we're a regional agency. The needs of our communities, both within Shasta County as well as within the North State, there's a lot of people that depend on public transportation to get around, not just here locally in Reading and Shasta Lake in the county, but there's a lot of other services that we identified that are way further away, whether it's pediatric care for certain needs and everything. My own daughter, for example, I've had to go and do a number of trips down to Sacramento because there's nothing up here for specialists. We looked at veteran services, those needs that we have there where we don't have veterans being able to get, center to center travel. They need to be relying on other services, and it's these inner city bus services that we have. A big part of this focus to look at the needs of our community who are unable to drive for a variety of reasons. The need to provide as best as feasibly possible, public transportation can meet their needs locally, but the rest of us benefit from their own vehicles and can easily have those and are able to drive across not just our region, but across the state. That's going to require partnerships. One of the things that we saw as a deficiency is that state level reports looked very little at the entire North State area in general. And our goal here was to bring all of the partners together we've had and say, look, we're now looking at this collectively as Humboldt Transit Authority, Tehama County, BCAG and B-Line, SRTA and RABA, across the board, Trinity Transit. How do we have those services and what are those gaps and needs? So what we're looking at is what are those reasonable, realistic things that we identify when we look at a state plan that says, hey, by 2050, we're gonna need eight trips up and down I-5 between Sacramento and Reading to meet need. One, that's based upon some old data, so that's outdated there. But they've not really engaged with us. They've not engaged with the transit operators, which agents say, hey, what do you identify as communities? Part of what this plan is to do is say, what is reasonable, what's realistic, what's our role as a regional agency, what's our role with the transit operators, what are they doing throughout the process, and how does that identify strategies for working together for the next 10, 15 plus years. And so what this plan and look at those recommendations is looking at those needs and say, what's realistic for each of the different partners, how do we support? For SRTA side, it's planning studies, and it's also help with grant writing, staff support for technical data, being able to bring money into the region, identifying those needs with the transit operators, supporting them by letters of support for those gap needs. For example, the route between Reading and Eureka. Trinity Transit, Humboldt Transit Authority, and RAB identified some significant technological challenges because of the mountains and everything else and what they need. And said, hey, if we can get these technologies and get state support to put some money for that, or we can have some of that portion of state money that goes all over the other place for transit and be able to have those needs, they can refine that process so that all of the users of the system from Eureka to Reading have that real-time data. It's reliable. They're not wondering, did I miss the vehicle bus? Did I not? And so they have that available. So this study has helped have those conversations, bring those state partners in so we can strategize those.
And those technological needs that you're talking about, are you talking the electric buses of the?
That's what I was, it's also being able to have shared fee payments across them so that
Okay.
it's easier for riders and they don't have cell service.
Right,
So
right.
getting a satellite to connect to
This is
Starlink and stuff like that. So we're working with our partners to help with that. And because of the way that we sit as an island MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization up here, sometimes we lead on efforts at the state that are rural counterparts. Tehama, Trinity, Modoc, Siskiyou, Delnor, we're helping them be connected to the rest of the state.
Does this go to CARB? Does CARB get a copy of this plan that you
I'm
have?
happy to send it to them.
Because I would love to send them this plan and say, look, we've done all this work, we've identified all these needs, we've spent all this time because you guys are, worded a little differently, but I'd say because you guys are so lame that none of this is going to work. because of your rules. I mean, I would love
Chris,
to
the one
push
good
back a
thing
little
it
bit.
did is it looked at what is the demand. At least we know the only high demand.
well aware of
is
that,
here
Chris.
in Sacramento.
Know what they did. I understand what they did, but what I'm saying is we're living in a state that is about to make all this obsolete in a few years.
I mean, first focus, I think, on what Sean said is that we can have exceptions to the innovative clean transit.
And that's
rule.
good to hear because I have not heard them being very reasonable at all.
It won't matter if there's no gas stations, so.
The other thing that we can push back on is this idea, I mean, going back to what we talked about before, diesel hybrids or using renewable diesel in the vehicles. So these efforts allow us to say there's still a need, there's still a desire. The technology that exists today is not applicable. And then to say like, we want to be able to move forward. But as my colleague Laurent explained, the diesel obviously can do it. And there are ways for us to reduce those particulate matters that come out of diesel vehicles using renewable diesel or diesel hybrid. So we are striving to meet the state's desires, but we're doing it in a way that is context appropriate for our region.
I mean, I'm working with some guys right now that have a tremendous project going on where it's going to be a ethanol-based diesel. Actually, it's everything from ethanol-based diesel to ethanol-based jet fuel. And it's low carbon. It's using the forest floor waste and farm waste, orchard waste, and turning that into a high grade, low carbon diesel. But since it's still a combustible engine, California doesn't realize this as a zero emissions. So it's like, and it's taking carbon off the forest floor. The byproduct is compressed or is natural gas, compressed gas, which they're going to run their vehicles on. I mean, it's about as green as you can get. But again, carbs rules. It's not considered zero emission, even though it's taking a ton of carbon out of the system.
There is good news. There's a little bit of common sense that's coming at the national level, and maybe some will come in.
I agree 100%. Unfortunately, CARB does not answer to the feds.
That's true.
They're a bunch of bureaucrats.
Can I ask a question? Yes. How many people did we actually survey for this? Because the numbers I saw, I wasn't sure if that was, when it says respondents, is that?
That's it. So we've sent it out through many methods. One of them, anybody that's that will accept push notifications from the RABA Runabout Shasta Connect app. We've sent it out via email. We've sent it to our partners so that they can share it widely on their websites. Counting wise, I can't say how many people we've reached because of all
It
this.
seems like it's very low sometimes, just a few people. Mike, I asked that question because especially from sitting on the RABA board, there are routes that we think people want, and then there's routes that people will take. And so all of these seem reasonable. They're locations I go to. I'm sure they're the locations that most people actually go to. But does that mean someone would be willing to take a bus to get there? And it doesn't seem like that's always the case. So I'm just curious, like, how are we actually getting the feedback from the people that actually use the bus? And are we thinking if we have a route, then people will take it? Like we're inducing their ridership? Yeah, are we inducing ridership? And if we are we even looking at if people will go there, but by what means are they willing to take to get there? So if a bus is not going to be the preferable answer, then what about vans, which we've done many times, is taking vans to Sacramento, and that only seems to sometimes work. So what are the other than just a route, what are the other things we're looking at? Sure. I mean,
So I will say that, so this is carries on from a prior that, I want to back it up so you guys can see that. The prior efforts that we've had, if you look at the top left or on your sheet of paper, this is slide. Slide 2. We had over 1,000 respondents on the initial effort that we did. We did a lot of social media buys for that to push it more and more. And so we have a pretty good feeling of what people want. They want a comfortable ride. And I-5 is, opinion, boring between here and Sacramento. So if they can do something else on that ride, they want Wi-Fi, they want maybe tables where they can play cards with their family.
or work.
Exactly. So Wi-Fi, sorry, so that, so they
Well, no,
have,
but a table allows you
oh,
to
yes,
work.
exactly, cup holders for the coffee, like, we know what they want, so that's in a bigger vehicle. Right, that's a motor coach style vehicle that allows that. We are looking, because of trying to purchase zero emission vehicles, and there not being a motor coach that can meet those needs, we are constantly like manipulating like what will work. So we have looked, Reading Area Bus Authority has looked at a commuter vehicle that has more comfortable seating, overhead lighting, individual air vents, the things like that, and would have Wi-Fi to allow that. We would, I mean, we all know there's a dead area on I-5, so we would want to see if we could have, better Wi-Fi on that service. And then in the short term, we were able to purchase those 2 motor coaches from the Sutter Transit. So by tracking what is happening on the Route 3 right now, that's going to tell us if people are willing to take a bus. It's between Reading and Chico, our 2 urban areas in the North State. That seems like a reasonable public transportation offering for the North State. And we now need to track that and see how much ridership it's getting and why people aren't riding it. That's really what we need to be asking, I think, because it's fully funded. We're not using regional dollars, super regional, as in North State super regional dollars that's being funded through the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority. This gives us a great opportunity to see, like, survey and do that analysis of, is it working? Are people riding it? Do we need all these amenities that are on the bus? Because it does make for a much more expensive bus to have.
Yeah, it's a different demographic that you would be going after,
Right.
but I mean, because I'm not sure if you build these things, we'd have the ridership. We don't have the ridership for people to get a few blocks away. So I'm not sure why we would have the ridership for such this is anyway, what do we have the numbers from RABA's Sacramento?
They were presented earlier today. I don't know if you were given that as your part of your like PowerPoint slides, but we can make certain you get back to that.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the ridership is going up, if it's, or.
Yeah, I can, if you'd like me to comment on that, I can say that the ridership on the Amtrak service is going up month after month, especially now that we allow cash paying passengers to go between Reading, Red Bluff, and Chico.
But yeah, that service just started in August, and that was one of the things we had as well as agents, is to see how that Reading to Chico service is doing. Do we see it with a local entity operator being in the community, knowing the community, being able to get the information out there rather than an agency 200 and something miles away, right, as part of that service, being able to be active in community and see how that goes in terms of outreaching and identifying needs. So we will continue to be watching and observing as well how the RABA to Chico route is doing and see how that plays into the needs. We have heard as part of the study, outreach and effort, for example, Glenn County, they are still interested in exploration of seeing an I-5 service down and helping facilitate the feeder services that would go to that for stop in Glenn County, for example. So these are ongoing conversations we're having with the partners to identify.
And I will say,
We need to open this up for public comment.
nope, this is a public, there's a 30-day public comment.
Okay.
So people, this
so
is really to
everybody-
bring this to the board so that you're seeing it this time. You've, had a presentation in December. This is the final draft that you have before you. Huge document, take home and enjoy, and then we'll be coming back in April.
Did you get more surveys in?
We got about 100 more.
Okay, that's good. Perfect. Because the first time it was only like
And
34 completely, right?
Clear, a survey means something specific. These are questionnaires.
Yeah.
So we're not looking for any statistical analysis on top of those.
Questionnaires, that's what I meant. Thank you. Thank you, Jen. You did a tremendous job on that, and I don't mean to, it's nothing with you, it's Carl.
Okay, I appreciate your comments. It's a 4-letter.
May I just add a quick question, a quick comment about the CARB
Yes, we
issue?
do have board member Matt Plummer also interested.
So,
Go ahead, Jeff.
I just wanted to add that while we are continuing to purchase diesel hybrid buses, we can also look to see about the potential as we look to replace the 2 used diesel buses to see about their replacement as diesel vehicles as well. But that would require further conversations with the state and if they would allow that in light of the fact that it's difficult to get the appropriate range for the distance that these buses are traveling.
Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, so we have this prioritization chart here, and then it looked like there was recommendations for each of those. And I guess I wasn't clear on whether we were using this prioritization to say, okay, we're going to focus on the highest priority, and then we're not going to do the other ones. Or we're saying we're proposing we do all of them, or if we get funding.
That's a
So-
great question. Thank you. I would think that that is something that you would come back to as part of your public, part of a board member comment, is to say like, we actually don't recommend doing anything on this
What is,
route.
what is the, I guess, your recommendation though? What are you saying to do?
We would
one, or are
focus,
you
so we
doing-
would focus on the ones that are highest turnover, like basically the easy, lowest hanging fruit to go for, and then we just stay in communication. A lot of those, if you read them, it says continue to coordinate with, right? So that means that we would be in our overall work program, we would have an intercity element where we put some time to make certain that we're staying involved at the state level on different efforts. The lowest hanging fruit, in my opinion, is definitely, in my opinion, and based on this, is the salmon service, salmon runner, or sorry, service to Sacramento. We regularly call that the salmon runner service because we've been in planning efforts for a long time. And then the one that I really want to, that maybe isn't as noticeable here unless you read the whole document, is San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority is working to extend rail service to Chico. That is a plan that just happened before we did this plan. And so we want to then continue working with them to say, and then ready, like, or make certain we have great bus connections when they do provide rail service to Chico, that we have great bus service to Chico, or we say, and now ready, like, let's push that further and have rail service.
So I think, I mean, and I, to be fair, I haven't read every word of this, the plan packet, but I think that type of prioritization of saying these are the two that really matter, and this is where we want to focus our resources, would be helpful, at least from my standpoint, and likely to the public as well. And then related to that, in terms of this prioritization chart, there's two questions, because if that is going to drive our actual prioritization of the routes, then what do we mean by user experience? What is, because the top one gets a 1 for that, which keeps it out of, everybody else has a much higher rating, and so that one.
Daniel, can you, John, Andoh, you still have your hand raised. And then Daniel, can you answer Matt Plummer's question about user experience? Yeah, I believe
Sure.
it has to do with brain.
Yeah.
So I can answer that quickly, and then if John has a comment, he can follow. So yeah, the user experience, essentially we started with comparing bus and rail, and clearly rail, the comfort of rail is always superior to bus service. So that was one consideration we looked at. But then we also looked at the corridors themselves, especially if it's a bus route. So depending on the windiness of the corridor, and also the time of being on the bus. If it's, let's say it's a 3-hour service or a 7-hour service, you're going to feel more uncomfortable the longer it gets, especially on a bus. So those are the kind of things we took into consideration when we looked at user experience. But starting between bus and rail, and then kind of deciphering which routes are more comfortable in terms of time and also windiness. So for example, I-5 is a much more, although there's curves and mountains, it's a much more comfortable facility than some of those smaller, more windy state routes, for example. So that's how we differentiated.
I think the Eugene one got a lower score, if I recall, it's because of the time in bus.
Yeah, I would have to,
That's
because I mean,
correct.
the
It's
Eureka Arcata one, which would be super windy
Yes.
and decently long, got a much higher score.
What was it, 8 hours? What's the?
I think 7 to 8.
It was a long, yeah, to Eugene, just
Yeah.
too long.
My last question, which I think ties to what Tanessa was saying a bit, is in terms of financial sustainability of these routes, is that factored into cost benefit, or how are we accounting for that?
And back to you, Daniel.
Thank you. Yeah, so essentially the cost, we looked at cost. Obviously, you have to look at cost, and going back to the rail versus bus, the cost for rail is obviously a lot higher than it is for buses. To do an intercity bus, you just automatically have a lower cost. So But you do need to look at kind of like a whole series of different benefits that you receive in running a particular corridor service. So first rail, is actually at a disadvantage for cost versus benefit typically, although especially for that one that goes to all the Eugene. It's a long route. There's limited markets, so there's a limited benefit. At the same time, the cost is extremely high, so that's why that got the lowest score of a 1, right? But the other rail service to Chico, it's never going to be a 6 because rail is expensive. But at the same time, the benefit of tying in to the state rail network, it's not such a long extension between Chico and Reading. And you're going to get all this access to the whole state rail network by doing that. So that's why that came in at like a 3, kind of a mid ranking. And then we did similar with buses, just in terms of, looking at the whole picture. What would it cost to implement the bus service versus all the different benefits you're going to get from, connectivity? And in particular, for example, one of the benefits that was really high priority as part of this process was making sure we had good access to medical facilities, especially VA facilities, for example. That was a big consideration as well in the cost benefit. So hope that helps. I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but there are more details in the plan as well on that.
One part that you haven't seen in here that kind of went into developing these is to look at where the hospitals are, what level of care they provide, where the universities are for educational purposes, what entertainment options are. Like, so that is like why we chose these routes and what goes into, I think it's the travel market is part of that. So in that regard, it is
So we can tie in.
Yeah.
So I'd like to also add to that, to Mr. Palmer's question about you want to look at financial sustainability. One of the biggest things for any of these services is also state support related to that, with the dollars that the state sets aside for intercity type services. That had been an ongoing, challenge for us in one element for some of the early exploration of travel for bus from Reading all the way down to Sacramento, to make sure we understood the rules and regulations of how that can be funded and how that can work out. For example, making some commitments of being very strong and supporting RABA to say, hey, with SJJPA for the Reading to Chico route, we need a revenue guarantee. We need a revenue guarantee out of a portion of the funds that you receive for that. You don't take money that, from a savings and then go send to some other estate. That revenue guarantee is to help pay for that service, right? And help support that need. We'd be looking something similar for Reading to Sacramento, having some, portion of revenue guarantee for that service. So we've got something that's there to help offset those costs, because that's a service that's not only going to serve Shasta County and serve all the counties down below, to connect people to the metro areas, but those individuals there and also across the state can travel up here as well and conduct business, recreate, and other activities. So those are always those things we're trying to figure out, because there are other funds set aside, but there's also certain regulations or certain criteria you have to meet. For example, a service has to have been already existing a year or 2 years before you become eligible for other funds. So figuring out what the operational need is, what are the criteria that we have to meet, so if different funds are there that the state has set aside for these services, and how we factor that in, those all play into this as well as we look at that. In terms of that, I would say the one thing that we have too, in terms of any of the routes that we reviewed, in talking with Caltrans, CalSTA, and other agencies, there's a lot of state support for I-5 between Reading and Sacramento. So I think that's one of those easier wins. We may be able to work with the state agencies. It may take us a little bit of time, work with Caltrans, SJJPA, and CalSTA, but that may be an opportunity for moving forward.
Sean, may I add a comment to your comment, if that's okay?
Yeah, proration. Well, you still have public comments for another 30 days.
30 days started the day we released this on Thursday, I believe. So until March 24th.
March 24th.
And that means you are part of the public, but you're actually a board. We would really love to hear comments from you.
Chair, I would advise, as generally we try to at least have public comment on any regular item, that you at least open up the allowance for public comment on this, just in case.
Okay, we'll open any public comment. Anybody in the queue?
Sean, may I add a comment to your comment that you made?
Make it brief, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that as part of the current services that RABA is providing under contract to Amtrak and the San Joaquin Joint Powers Authority, should this board and San Joaquin's agree, that route could evolve into becoming that I-5 service. The other routes that are presented are likely to be operated by other operators other than RABA, which could include Trinity Transit, the state, but those are all to be determined as we go through this process.
We have a event right now for the city, so I gotta.
Make sure.
Okay, we still have a quorum, so we can.
We still have a quorum, we do. We have two more brief action items.
Okay, so we are done with you, but you come back on, right here?
Yes, I do.
Okay, item 15.
Okay,
Approve an amendment number 4 to the agreement with North State Intercity Bus Rail. Am I on the right one? No, I'm wrong. It's the Dignity Health, right?
Yes.
Is that where you are?
Number 15, yes.
All right, so item number 15 is to approve amendment number 4 to the agreement that SRTA has with Dignity Health Connected Living, please excuse me, but I might say DHCL. Again, Dignity Health Connected Living, they provide specialized public transportation services under contract to SRTA. One of those specialized public transportation services that they do is a consolidated they serve as our operator for Consolidated Transportation Services Agency. As you might have seen in item, I believe 10.7 in the consent calendar, SRTA, DHCL, and RABA are working closely to make a more efficient, user-friendly transit system, and we're consolidating efforts. Attachment B to the staff report is a letter from the Richmond Area Bus Authority seeking to be the CTSA, Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, which currently is operated right now by Dignity Health Connected Living. We're staff are moving forward with that, and it would come before this board as part of our Transportation Development Act budget. Since the RABA sent us that letter, there are several things that will help us being SRTA, DHCL, and RABA to continue to step forward with this. One, we need to extend the contract, and this board has the authority to do that until June 30th, 2027. We need to amend Appendix A of the agreement so that it reflects more specifically all the existing services that are provided by Dignity Health Connected Living. And C, it adds federal clauses and certifications to the special conditions. With that, I will turn it over to you for discussion.
Okay, Matt?
I'll make a motion. Unless there's questions to approve amendment for this contract.
And extend the contract also.
Yeah, including extension.
I will
Amendment
second.
4 includes the extension and 2 other things.
And I will second it.
Before we vote, I just wanted to make a clarification on how my name's pronounced before we read off the front. It's the I sounds like a Y, Gallagher.
Gallagher.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so we have the first by Plummer, the second by Helston. So roll call vote.
Roll call vote. All right, well, we have Audette and Cry out, so we'll start with Board Member Gallier.
Yes. Gallagher.
Gallagher, I'm sorry.
Yeah. No worries.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Plummer,
Yes.
Board Member Resner,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Great, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jennifer.
I'll be back.
All right.
Okay, number 16, we'll receive another presentation on the draft revision of Highway 273 comprehensive multimodal corridor plan and provide comments.
Hey, hello.
Let me get this going here. Okay.
All right. I think I have it fixed. Right.
Hello again, long time no see. Could I wait until?
No, you're fine.
Okay. I'm here today to talk about the Envision 273 corridor plan. I wanted to, since this is a multi-year effort, I'd like to kind of recap past actions on that. Attachment A of the staff report has a complete history of board past actions, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the process here. It's not working right. Okay, so I want to give a little history about the corridor. The corridor is the oldest traffic corridor in the region, and it's probably the second most significant after I-5. It has a long history of travel. This shows the corridor in the early 1920s when this was the Pacific Highway. This is looking south from Butte Street. At the time, the speed limit was 20 miles an hour. This is a picture of the corridor also around that time. This is when it was first entered into the highway system in the 1920s. And this shows that the current alignment has basically already been established. If you look up in the corner, you can see what is now downtown Reading. Back then it was just all of Reading. And roughly in the center, you can see the undercrossing where it ducks under the railroad. Since then, adjacent land uses have changed, even if the corridor's alignment has not. So that's posed a lot of challenges. Even though the surrounding land use has changed, much of the corridor design has not. This should look really familiar to anyone. This is the intersection of Market Street, aka 273, and Cypress Avenue, circa 1959. And at the time, Cypress Avenue was a highway also. And that's why you have the wide sweeping turn, and that turn is still there. Here's a picture of the Miracle Mile, also known as North Market Street, from around that time as well. Here, it looks even more like a highway now, today, than it did back then when it was the highway. If you look over on the right, you can see it's signed at 35 miles an hour. Today, the same segment is signed at 45. And here you have the railroad crossing shortly after it was widened in 1938. As you can see, there's a sidewalk and lighting here, and at some point along the way, we lost that. So that's how we ended up here. This is a heat map of collisions between 2011 and 2020. The darker spots show basically where more collisions are happening, and it gets more detail the further you zoom in. During that time, there were 587 reported crashes, resulting in 42 people killed and 68 people seriously injured. And during that same time, we found that over 1 out of 3 of all crashes on 273 were due to unsafe speeds. 1 out of 8, or over 12%, of all crash fatalities in the Shasta region, all crash fatalities in the county, occurred on 273. And nearly a third of all fatalities involving somebody walking or biking that was struck by an automobile occurred on 273. So Caltrans and SRTA got together and started working on a plan. We decided to divide the corridor into 2 segments and apply for 2 different grant funds because it's such a complex corridor. You have all of the cities, you have Reading and Anderson, you have the railroad crossing, you have all of these waterways that it has to cross. It's really complex, 16 miles, it's a lot of work. So SRTA applied for 1 grant, Caltrans applied for another, and we were both successful. So in order to save money, we combined the funds using a joint powers agreement. And that took a little while to figure out the details, but once we got the finalized JPA and a notice to proceed, we had already gone through the procurement process and selected GHD, and we hit the ground running. So as far as the process goes, it was guided by 2 different committees. There was a project advisory committee that is staff level representation from the city of Anderson, the city of Reading, both public works and parks, because there's 2 major city parks on the corridor. RABA, Shasta County Public Works and Planning Division, Healthy Shasta, Reading Rancheria, and Reading Bike Share. We also extended an invitation to Union Pacific Railroad, didn't receive a response. So that was the day-to-day work. And every now and then we would have a meeting of the executive advisory committee to make sure we were on the right track and we were aligning with the respective agencies' goals. And that was comprised of executive staff from Caltrans District 2, the executive director of SRTA, Sean, and public works directors from Shasta County, City of Reading, and Anderson. So once work began, we started off with a corridor tour. We think it's really important for the consultant to get out and experience the corridor. And this also served as a great time to meet local staff and get their unique knowledge from the corridor. We used a variety of methods to build awareness. It's listed in attachment B on the staff report, a full list, but this is a highlight. Bunch of different platforms, including a mailing to all of the addresses within a half mile of the corridor. That represented some 22,000 addresses. We held public workshops. This one was a pop-up workshop in downtown Reading, right off the corridor. We held a visioning event earlier this year. We brought a corridor expert who's been doing this for something along the line of 30 years. And he came along, we toured the corridor, certain segments that were big challenges. And he encouraged us to think out of the box, to think about what's really possible. How can we make transformative change? We also had online engagement for about a year. The website is still up. It's envision273.org. And there were a variety of ways to leave comments. And you can go in, it's all archived. You can go in and see the individual comments now. This is an online push pin map. People can drop a pin, comment on something they like, make a suggestion, make a comment. And I believe they can be voted up on this page as well, right? Yeah. Then there was like an idea wall. And here people could just enter in ideas about anything. People could upvote it or downvote it and even have running conversations. And then we had the survey. And so that survey, we pushed people to the survey through a variety of methods, including, online ads, but the mailing was designed to push people to the survey. So out of those 22,000 mailers, we got about 1,100 comments, 1,100 responses. But the overall theme, that we heard was safety. Safety is a big challenge on the corridor. So we took all of that input and it helped us draft the corridor vision. And that's on, I think, page 2 of the overall draft plan in full. It's also reproduced here. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'll just read the bold here. The State Route 273 corridor vision aims to achieve a safe, efficient, and reliable transportation system for the movement of goods and people. This vision seeks to maximize the accessibility, resiliency, and connectedness of this corridor for all users. And this was something that the Project Advisory Committee came to agree. Then we began the nitty-gritty technical planning work, and this is where our consultant comes in. And he's going to talk about that once I conclude, but this is basically the work that he's done here, and just a few bullet points being overly reductive. So our next steps will be follow-up public engagement. We published the draft plan on the project website, Envision 273, and we're beginning outreach. We're going to have some social media posts. We're going to have 2 public open house events, one March 10th in Reading, another March 11th in Anderson at the community center. The Reading one's probably going to be a pop-up event downtown again, but it may go inside depending on the weather. And there'll be both lunchtime and evening sessions, so we can reach a wide variety of local residents.
The community center in Anderson, or are you talking about VFW?
No, this time it's going to be at the community center.
Okay.
Yeah. So that takes us to the deliverables. So you have a draft plan of the final deliverable before you. We'll take all of the feedback we've received from you, and you can give us comment anytime through March 24th. I know at 137 pages, it's a lot to review. So just email me, and my address is the same as Sean's, only it's MKUKER, or you can email Sean, but he asked that I use my name first. So, so we'll have the final plan incorporating feedback before you in April. It's going to include some conceptual drawings and designs, prioritize list of projects, and we're going to identify potential funding sources. We expect some improvements are going to be able to be programmed through the State Highway Operations and Protection Program, aka SHOP. That's an acronym that you will hear a lot at these meetings. And others may require grant funding through other programs, such as the Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, the Active Transportation Program, ETP, and others. And I guess that's really about it. I'm gonna throw to Todd now, and he's going to share. And he's gonna talk more about the actual plan work itself. So you can, yeah, we can just share. So it's signed off.
Go now.
Yeah.
I don't think I was meant to. So it's the couple of big role.
Is the laptop still a panelist?
It appears to be so, yeah.
There you go.
Your screen.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Okay.
All right. You guys hear me?
Good. Yes.
Need a microphone in here. Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. And thank you guys for the time. I want to dive into some of the performance assessment that was completed at the onset of the project. So to inform kind of the background conditions, our understanding of the existing conditions. And then I'm going to dive into some of the public engagement, some of the feedback, and then really talk more about the project selection process, because I think that's where we get into the future state that we're all envisioning, which is this plan leading to more funding. So the first thing I'll note is that this is a long corridor, as you all know. So we broke it down into 10 segments, and that was not only to facilitate the analysis itself, but it's also to really make sure that the assessment and the recommendations are reflective of the context that they're in. There's different contexts here at play. There's downtown Reading, downtown Anderson, Miracle Mile, the Rancheria, county stretches that are really rural highways. So lots of different contexts, and that plays into not only how we think about things, but also the types of improvements that are backed up by guidelines and design manuals from Caltrans and other applicable agencies. So a place-based approach is what we employed, and that is consistent with the Caltrans planning framework for corridors such as this, and goes into informing our recommendations. The performance measures are selected in large part going back to some of the things Michael was talking about earlier. These federal planning factors kind of trickle down to the state, to the region, and all of it really rolls up into the decision on what to program, what to prioritize in terms of where our dollars go. And so in that vein, we want to make sure that we hit all of these. And these make sure that the CMCP, which is the name, the jargon name for the project, I know the public name is Envision 273. This is a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan. And as such, it needs to follow the Caltrans planning guidelines for CMCPs. And as long as we do that, we ensure that the projects in the CMCP are eligible for another acronym, SCCP funding, Solutions for Congested Corridor Program. That's SB1 funding that's available. It's state money. And if the project is in here, it becomes eligible for that program. And that's a big pot of money. So we look at operations and reliability. Basically, how does it function for cars? Is there delay? Is there congestion? I will talk a little bit more about reliability in a second, because that's a little bit of a different way of thinking of things. Mobility and connectivity is basically how easy it is to get around the corridor on foot or on bike. Can you get across the corridor? Is that a barrier? Can you get along the corridor? Things like that. We look at transit connectivity as well, mode share. We look at safety, and that largely looks back at collision records, collision history, which Michael covered briefly as well. Sustainability, resiliency, and equity are additional factors that go into, those are required in the CMCP guidelines. They are currently in the federal planning factors. That some of those may change. Sustainability and resiliency essentially looks at vehicle miles traveled, air quality and emissions, which we've talked about a little bit earlier today,
Emergency evacuation is something that's come up, that came up in our last executive advisory committee. I know it's top of mind up here, and in many communities, rural communities, that we work in. Equity essentially is looked at, on the basis of, median household income. There are other forms of equity, but that's the main one here. Okay, so performance. This is all in the report in much greater detail, but I want to highlight a few different things. We look at something called level of traffic stress for bicycles. That's the image on the left on your screen, and that's essentially rating how comfortable it is. And there's a relationship between comfort and safety as well, because the comfort is driven by vehicle speeds, the amount of vehicles that are interacting with people that are on bikes or walking. And you can see that a lot of the local streets off the highway are relatively comfortable. They're low speed roads, low volume roads. They don't need a lot of bicycle infrastructure because of their nature. But once you get to 273 and you try to cross it, it's problematic. And we see that in the collision heat maps a little bit further down the road, where 273 itself is a barrier, not only linear, it's tough to get up and down 273 in large stretches, especially south of Bonneview. It's also hard to get across. Operations and reliability, I think most people understand level of service. How long am I waiting on average at an intersection? And we give that a grade A through F. And that's based on the average peak hour condition. And one of the things I want to talk about here is that we, on average, have very high performing corridor here, where level of service A, B, C, these are good grades. These are much better than what would typically be considered a congested corridor. However, we have very high or very low reliability, and that's due to a lot of factors. And those are the moments we remember. We don't really remember the smooth sailing commutes or the smooth trips to the grocery store, but we remember those frustrating moments. And that low reliability oftentimes is due to collisions on the shoulder, vehicle breakdowns, things like that. Can be weather events, it can be rain, it could be snow, it could be something like a large arena if you were near a sports team. In our case, it also has a lot to do with the railroad. When the railroad's blocking access, that causes a huge spike in travel time. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit, because the travel time reliability performance measure is something that can be a little bit challenging to wrap your head around. You could have an uncongested corridor that is unreliable, which is what we have, or you can also have a reliably congested corridor. Safety and equity I touched on. I don't think I need to dive too much more into that. We looked at bicycle collisions, pedestrian collisions, and then we looked at all collisions by severity. We really want to focus on the fatal and severe injury crashes. The severe injury crashes can very easily lead to a fatal crash. So we kind of lump those together as the types of collisions we want to try to address and eliminate. We had three kind of buckets of strategies when we looked at the corridor. One was dealing with the arterial itself, the highway. How do we reduce speeds? Reducing speed reduces velocity, reduces the kinetic energy, reduces the crash outcome. That is a goal that is shared by most of the folks that we had in our advisory meetings, and certainly also something we heard from the public. Freight is important to the region. We have freight movement through Reading, 299 to 44. We have freight moving along 273, and then we have that freight rail corridor. And looking at how those rail crossings pose a challenge to planning on the corridor is something we spent some time talking about, looking at some possible solutions and recommending future action. Complete streets, and this, I want to go back to the place types I mentioned. If you look at Caltrans as a Design Information Bulletin 94, there are different context appropriate solutions. And so if you're in the large gap between Anderson and Bonneview or Buenaventura, the appropriate solution may be just to have a side path rather than building up curb, gutters, sidewalks, and bike lanes on the street. The vehicle, the highway is going to keep moving at a faster speed. You're not going to have a lot of destinations people need to get to across the street. And so having that path on the side would be a context appropriate solution. Meanwhile, downtown Reading, you're going to want sidewalks and bike lanes as a more context appropriate solution. Okay, the survey, again, we got a lot of answers, and I think the mailer was really helpful in doing that to bolster, it can be tough in some areas to get a lot of people to show up to a meeting, and that can be the case up here sometimes. And so that mailer really allowed us to get a much wider range of input and feedback and opinions on the corridor. And you can see on the top, we got folks responding that used all the different segments of the corridor. So it's not like everyone that responded was from downtown Reading or Anderson. It was spread throughout, which was great. And a variety of uses of 273, a lot of work trips, a lot of day-to-day grocery and errand trips. I'm going to focus on the priorities that we heard from the community on the right. I'm going to just walk through some of the top ones, just to emphasize the kind of unanimous support for that safety focus. Modifying intersections to reduce crash risks. That could be lighting, improving visibility, improving signage. All of that was commonly ranked as the first choice. So people broadly agreed with that. People also broadly agreed with improving sidewalks in downtown, adding and improving bike lanes in downtown, expanding the trail system kind of in between Reading, Anderson, providing that off-street path. Improving the appearance was lower, it was fifth. Improving access to bus stops was sixth. Reducing travel times for trucks and cars was a low priority. So people, and that is reflective of our findings, that it's largely uncongested. That was not a high priority. We need to move faster. Interestingly, though, narrowing lanes or road widths to slow down traffic was the lowest priority. And so the countermeasure to fast travel is not popular either. And so that forces us to really kind of think differently about the solutions. Road diets are a common solution to try to calm travel speeds and improve safety. A lot of drivers in terms of how people move around, and a lot of people felt safe driving a car or truck. But if you look on the left, the further you are to the right, the less safe you feel biking, skateboarding, walking, taking public transit, and carpooling. So people like to drive themselves, which is, I can relate to that. Okay, I'm going to keep moving along, recognizing I'm way over time. Some interesting ideas on the ideas wall. And again, it was nice to see that community feedback, the ability to upvote your neighbor, so to speak. Some creative landscaping and streetscape concepts, as well as an opportunity to see maybe traffic lights replaced with roundabouts in many locations, although I'm sure, that one also got 4 downvotes. So that's a mixed opinion on that, I'm sure. So I want to get into the projects. How do we come up with the projects? Well, a CMCP really, it's one of its main jobs is to ingest and absorb all the projects that are out there, all the things that are planned, that are programmed, and assess them, evaluate them, and prioritize them based on those metrics that I mentioned earlier and public feedback. We added kind of a third wing to this, which was these feasibility studies. And these are ideas that have either been brought up in the past in the region, things that we wanted to evaluate, to screen out to see whether they're how possible those might be, and include them in the project list and see where they shake out in terms of their benefit cost assessment. So this is a sampling of the projects that were already out there. One of the big ones, Michael mentioned the shop, that top bullet there, the downtown Reading CAP-M, that is a maintenance project funded through the shop. That is underway and moving forward. And frankly, we're very fortunate to have that moving forward. It adds a ton of improvements to the corridor that are in line with the planning process that we are undertaking. And I'm sure some folks from Caltrans could clarify or go on a little bit more about that process. But that's a project that we're quite fortunate to have, because its implementation timeline is shorter than would otherwise be the case if we didn't have it. So we're going to get improvements soon with that project along the corridor. Rider 273 is a lighting project. One thing I didn't go into was the different crash types. A lot of those collisions south of Buenaventura, south of Bonneview are at night, like 47%, 45%, 52%, segment by segment. It varies a little bit, but a lot of those are at night, whether they're with a bike or ped or another car. Lighting is a big part of what I think is going to be an important solution here. All right. Intersection of Cypress and Pine is something that's probably been talked about for a long time. We looked at some improvements there and what could be done. I'm going to move on to the feasibility study. So these are things that are not already planned, not already programmed, but we wanted to look at them at some level in this study and include them for future funding opportunities, as I mentioned earlier. Grade crossing relocation. So that railroad alignment is really problematic in terms of transportation and connectivity. It's a huge hurdle to work with UP. I think we all kind of recognize that. They have a lot of control and influence. And what we recommend is that a close partnership, a study with them be undertaken to specifically look at what those requirements would be of either relocating grade crossings, consolidating them, or potentially looking at some grade separation. They're looking typically for a 3-to-1 replacement ratio. So if you want to add a new crossing, they want you to close 3 grade crossings, right? They're trying to minimize those as well. There are funding programs. There's federal programs, the Rail Crossing Enhancement Program, that are available out there, but it requires that partnership with UP, which we weren't really able to solicit and get as part of this study. But it's an effort certainly worth undertaking. We looked at a class 1 trail from Reading to Anderson, or essentially a continuous trail system. We think that's relatively feasible, and we recommend putting that into the bucket of projects to look at. Downtown Reading gateways were also looked at, and so we looked at 44, 299, Miracle Mile, Placer Street, and Cypress, kind of each entering the corridor into Reading with various degrees of feasibility. Those are documented in the report, depending on what we want to do at each one, but certainly some opportunities for enhancements, especially Cypress to Angela. We've got a project there that we'd happy to talk about if there's time. We also looked at the couplet conversions, and so you have a lot of one-way couplets downtown, and what that could look like from an operational perspective if they all go two-way, or if a subset of them go two-way. And so we have some operational analysis on that front as well. And we think the partial couplet conversion could be quite feasible from keeping the traffic moving. And that's essentially everything south of 44 going to two-way traffic, but keeping everything 44 to 99 to 299 and north as one-way system. So then here's an incomplete list of the proposed projects. The more complete list is in your packet and in the report. But I wanted to highlight how we're including in this plan both additional planning studies and design and construction phases. So again, that really provides a more flexible document at the back end when you want to point to it to say, hey, our project is in this plan. We can apply for funding through this state program, the SCCP. You have the opportunity to apply for additional planning. And when I say planning, I don't mean another plan like this. I mean like the PA&ED phase, right? You want to go in and do your detailed environmental studies and get survey and stuff like that. So that can all be accomplished with the way we've broken out the projects. The freight rail is one that I mentioned earlier, working with UP to figure out what their appetite is for some rail. It will benefit them as well, right? When there are incidents with the grade crossings, that's not a good time for UP either. And so I think once you get them to the table, I think some opportunities could come up and possibly some negotiations on that 3-to-1 closure, which is very difficult because you don't have a lot of crossings already. Okay, here's a couple of slides that we can talk through. One of the things we wanted to look at is, again, that Cypress at Pine kind of weave intersection, which actually operates quite well for vehicles. but it's a lot of asphalt out there. We wanted to look at making, what is the most compact we can make that intersection without compromising vehicle flow. And so we ran some models, came up with some geometry there. This is an example of what could be done at that location by keeping it a traffic signal. We also looked at what the potential footprint of a roundabout might be. And of course, there's also the potential that if ultimately the couplets are reversed, that those have two-way traffic on Pine in California as well. And so that in subsequent phases, when we get the public feedback on these improvements and get your guys' feedback, the preferred improvement package, if that rises to the top, we'll do a full benefit cost assessment of that type of change. We looked at some possible new grade crossing locations. Happy Valley Road was one of them in the county. Again, that would require some consolidation of other crossing locations. But this was in response to discussions with county staff as a suitable location for a new crossing. So I'm way over on my time, so I'm going to wrap up and open it up for questions. But again, we wanted to really make sure that this planning effort follows the Caltrans corridor planning process guide closely. That opens up funding opportunities in the future, which really is what we want this document to do. We want it to be a mechanism for the region to apply for and secure potentially large sums of money for implementation.
Thank you, Todd.
Okay.
Did a stoplight at Latona ever come up in those?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's been, we've spoken with the county about that quite a bit, so.
Okay. Because Caltrans at one point was trying to make a private individual put in a stoplight there in order to do a project. And it's like, you guys know you need a stoplight there, but you know, why are you making somebody else pay for it? So
Yeah.
I'm glad that came up, and if I get to the meeting, I'll push that myself.
Are there any questions or comments?
Yeah.
On the safety diagram there, segment 5, I'm guessing that isn't like a comprehensive mapping of where the accidents are happening. But it looks like, I think it's hard to make out with that size, but it looks like a lot of them are happening at that roundabout at South Bonneview.
That's on 273. There's no roundabout on.
Yeah, that's.
Or so, okay,
That's
where
the-
South Bonneview hits 273 there.
Correct.
Okay. Got it. But is that a fair representation though? Like, is there a high congestion?
Yes, there's a lot of collisions at Bonneview in 273.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
All right, anybody else? Open it up.
So I know it's a lot to digest, but we are accepting comments through the 24th. You can send me an email. There's also a form on the website. Please share it with your constituents. Please let them know about the upcoming workshops. You'll get to see Todd again.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So thank you for your time.
And where is the Anderson Community Center? Because I figured the Anderson City Councilman would know if I did, but I don't
That's
know either.
the one that's
The
right.
one, the little city hall there?
Yeah,
Perfect.
so we held our kickoff event
That's what we
there.
both guessed.
Yeah,
DFW was not, the Veterans Hall was not available, so we talked with the city staff and they.
That works. Yeah, it works.
Okay. Just in case it doesn't look like, but since it is a regular item, I would open at least for public comment if there's any.
Is there anybody in queue for a public comment?
I'm gonna guess no.
I don't see.
None from me.
Anybody here? Opposed, public comment?
thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Very good.
Thank you.
So item 17, adopt a resolution 2501 transferring 4 state of good repair projects to make ready for Area Bus Authority, the implementing agency, and get SRTA out of the act.
I think you know what we're talking about here. So let's see, the agenda item 17 is asking the board to transfer those 4 projects. They right now are under CERTA's purview. They're listed in that table. We'd be just transferring those, and Reading Area Bus Authority would become the implementing agency. This is part of our effort to consolidate transit efforts under the Readiness Area Bus Authority. And those vehicles will still be used for their intended purpose, which is DHCL operations. One caveat, you see that there's a I think, bus washer. And that is no longer needed and, it can be done at RABA's facilities. So that once they're under RABA's, domain, RABA will look to make any changes to those. So staff recommendation is to adopt resolution 2501, transferring the 4 projects and allowing the executive director to submit any necessary documentations as appropriate.
We'll make a motion to adopt
I'll second.
and submit whatever documents are necessary.
Okay, it's been moved by Kelstrom and seconded by Dan.
That's one way to get around Gal here.
That's how I did it. Nailed it.
Yeah, no problem there. And I would note that, boy, some of these state of good repair motions went back a long time. I even saw one back there where Kehoe made the first and Watkins made a second. So,
Yeah, we do provide that history, so you know, kind of what the board has done in this effort.
okay, Amy, we have the first and the second. Call for a roll call vote.
Great. Board Member Gellier,
Yes.
Board Member Kellstrom,
Yes.
Board Member Plummer,
Yes.
Board Member Resner,
Yes.
and Chair Watkins.
Yes.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Well, I want to thank Erin. She's really hung in there the whole time, all the way from Salt Lake City or somewhere like that.
Yeah, wow. I was about to say, guys, are we gonna hit a 4-hour mark here? No, 3 was sufficient.
If you
I'm
notice that
impressed.
we're asking for comments from future meetings, I heard none.
I didn't hear anything.
And so we are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone. Board members. if
Thank you,
can stay
gentlemen.
Briefly, we'll have Amy with your signatures for the one form. It doesn't have to get you later. Get some others.
And I need my resolution signed. Yes. So Greg, I need you to sign, excuse me, Chair.